Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And today we're going to find out what's on the menu. We're up to Leviticus 11, and I think that there may just be some conflicts in translation in this Bible, making it a little uncertain. What things can you eat that are going to send you to hell, and what things can you eat that are just going to send you to the bathroom? Anybody have any opening comments?
This is going to be so much fun.
I'm feeling it.
Yes,
man.
I've come prepared. I won't say how many pages I have for this. You need to guess.
It's a surprise.
Yes, it is a surprise.
Anyone else feel like a bacon double cheeseburger?
Yeah, let's go to Wendy's or something.
With some shrimp.
Yes.
Bacon or some nonsense.
Yeah, bacon wrapped shrimp.
Whoa.
There you go. That's sacrilegious.
So I have a bit of an introduction. One of the things that people talk about when it comes to this chapter is it's all to do with the way we use words and how when people look at the Bible or a specific translation of the Bible, they'll see this word and be like, that's not the way we use this word in English, which is true, but words do change meaning over time, and even in English, words haven't always meant the same thing. So an example that I always hear is people say things like, the Bible calls bats birds. But first of all, it doesn't use the word bird. It wasn't written in English. And second of all, the word bird in English hasn't always meant the taxonomic grouping of animals with, warm-blooded animals with wings and feathers, let's say.
You mean dinosaurs?
Well, modern descendants of dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. So even in English, for example, a ladybird is the English name, the British English name for a ladybug. It's not a bird; it's a bug.
Because in Britain, ladies are birds, aren't they?
Actually,
Unless they're
first
ladies. Yeah, that's also true. Another example is like the word fish doesn't really have a taxonomic meaning, but in modern English, normally people think of fish. They think of either sharks and those sharks, rays, and also like regular bony fish. But the word fish in English has meant other things as well. For example,
Shellfish.
shellfish.
Scandinavian, though. So.
Shellfish aren't fish, right? But they're maybe at one point the word fish was more generic than that. And
I think what you're trying to illustrate is that the way the Hebrew applies these words, I've noticed this myself, things are defined by what they do rather than what they are. Yes. So if it lives in the water, it's a fish. If it flies in the air, it's foul.
And the habit of not...
Sounds right to me today, Aaron. See, those are just different kinds of things.
Oh,
now we know what kinds are. Hooray!
This is hilarious.
I hope you're paying attention, Kent.
The absolute obsession with literally translating all those words into English and demanding they stick with their taxonomic significance has led to some outrageous absurdities from the evangelicals. When I was young, the best Christian cartoons going, which is not saying much, was the Hanna-Barbera Greatest Adventure series. And the only ones my parents never really got me to watch was the one on Jonah, because in that one, they say that it wasn't a whale, it was a fish, but it was a fish specially created for this purpose so that there would be no contradiction. And then you could, magic your way out of any issues with the thing. So they literally insisted that God made a special creature which would taxonomically be considered a fish with fins and scales to swallow Jonah without killing him for this. And then, I don't know, it went to sleep for 10 billion years and became Cthulhu. I don't know. But just poof, magic. Not even got swallowed by a whale, which is insane, but
I can just imagine a tuna trawler saying, we're going to need a bigger boat.
So if you look at old artwork, like the old maps in the Middle Ages, and they're going to have pictures, illustrations of whales. in these old medieval maps. And the whales that they have are ray-finned. They don't have flippers and flukes. They have ray fins, and they have scales and nostrils that spray water out. Not breath of air, but water.
Sure.
Whales here.
Yeah. And the first verse we're going to come across, not the second verse we're going to come across, is going to have it's going to talk about two different words that both mean animal, but even those don't necessarily mean animal in the same way that we mean them in English.
Yeah.
And they have and in Hebrew, sometimes they mean a specific type of animal, and sometimes either word can be used as a generic word for all animals. So,
Yeah, me and Isaac have been discussing about this on Discord a lot. So
Speaking of
Yeah,
the
we've
Discord,
been
I feel
arguing.
like everyone should join that if they haven't. I don't know why they haven't thus
Absolutely.
far.
I haven't had time.
Well, I know
to
why I haven't.
Because you don't
I
have
would
students.
just
It's fun there. No, language changes, and English is one of the worst hodgepodges of multiple different languages over the course of a couple thousand years. So to use it as the main form of text that we use for the Bible or any religious text is kind of ridiculous if you think about it, because, as you said correctly, words mean different things depending on what culture you're from. And English just absorbs it all and just says, hey, it's this thing now, even though that it might not be. Or Old English versus New English, Scandinavian, Germanic, Latin, you name it. I mean, it's all part of it. And so when we read this stuff, it's kind of a grain of salt, I'd say.
Mm.
Just kind
I mean,
of
we should put salt on all of this stuff anyway.
I definitely agree. And, since we're talking about food today, a little bit of seasoning definitely will help today, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh my god, I definitely should have eaten before this. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we're not just
All right.
using salt here. We're not that bad. We're gonna go for the full spice blend.
All right. If
The spice must flow.
unless
Yeah.
unless somebody else wants to, I'm going to start reading. Okay.
All right.
read up to 28.
All right. We're talking about clean and unclean food. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Say to the Israelites, of all the animals that live on land, these are the ones you may eat. You may eat any animal that has a divided hoof and that chews the cud. There are some that only chews the cud or only have a divided hoof, but you must not eat them. The camel, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof." Yeah, it kind of does. But okay, never mind. "It is ceremonially unclean for you," which means it's not really. Wait, no, comment yet. "The hyrax, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof, so it is unclean for you. And the pig, though it has a divided hoof, does not
I think
chew
you
the
skipped
cud."
one.
Did I?
Yes,
The
hare.
camel, the hyrax,
The rabbit.
the
hare.
rabbit.
the rabbit. Yeah.
The rabbit, though it chews the cud, and they don't, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean for you.
Real
And the
quick,
pig.
I want to add, rabbits and hares are two completely different species, and they're not interchangeable.
And it's translated as both. It's translated as both.
I have
Yeah.
hair. You have
We'll
hair.
talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, we'll get.
Details,
Sorry.
though.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
since we're already going to be doing some commentary, the camel does have a divided hoof.
The commentators that I've read say that it doesn't.
Well, I
Milgrom,
don't,
for
what do the
example-
commentators? What do the commentators know about taxonomy?
That's a good question.
Because
for
the
example,
camel does have a divided hoof. They've just their hoof is divided the same way, the cloven hoof, as the other artiodactyls, but the camels lost their outer toes, which would be the back toes in this case, so that they have a camel toe.
wait a minute. First of all,
And in fairness, camel toe. Come on, it's.
But I think the case that doesn't go all the way. Doesn't
So
not
here,
cloven all the way through.
The word of God is saying, "Thou shalt not eat the camel toe."
Didn't I make that
wait a minute. So I have Milgrom here. He says the camel. Well, I'm skipping a bit of commentary here because you're so eager to this. But he says the camel has a 3-chambered stomach and it chews the cud. The feet have cushion-like soles enveloped in hardened skin. Each foot is cleft into 2 toes, but it has no hoof. The camel of the Bible was probably the single-humped dromedary. Dromedary, sorry.
It's still classed as an artiodactyl.
Yeah, but it's
It
not a ruminant.
technically does have hooves. It just doesn't have the enveloping hooves that some other artiodactyls do.
And actually, Milgrom is not Milgrom. Actually, Levine also says that the camel does not have fully cleft hooves. Its hoof is split in its upper part, but bound together in its lower part.
And as I said, even if you include hippos and things like that, you do get the four-way cloven hoof, but without a thumb, right? So you get the four-way cloven hoof. So their toes are like this, except the camels lost the back toes. They only have the front ones.
Gotta love it.
So,
Okay,
So
who's
fast.
Glad I
on?
don't walk with my fingernails.
all right. You must
Should we-
not
should we-
eat their meat nor touch their carcasses. They are unclean for you, which means that Jewish people cannot play football.
Ah,
Or have a lucky rabbit's foot.
Oh man.
Indeed. Indeed. Which neither can they cross the desert on the proper ships thereof.
Well, it says you cannot touch their carcasses, not that you cannot
Yeah.
touch them alive.
Yeah.
yes,
Good
yes.
point.
Well,
Eat
Their
or touch
camel
their
dies, all
carcass.
their stuff on the back.
I think we're diverging too much. Please continue reading.
Where's the fun if we can't diverge on something like this?
Well,
Because
let's
this
finish
is-
the text.
Wait,
Wait. Let's finish the text and then commentate, please.
No, it's boring that
No,
way.
Aren't gonna commentate. They're talking about animals and
I know, but it's
classifying
just
them.
to make it. It's just
I think
to
this
make it
is
much
a
easier
good place
for
to
us.
stop, though.
I don't know.
Verse
Okay,
8 is
okay,
a good
so
place to
don't-
stop.
Rabbits don't chew cud.
Okay, first of all, so if we're going to do this way now, first of all, verse 1 of all the animals, Hebrew Bible reads Zot ha-chaya. This is the animal, literally. I mean, chaya is in modern Hebrew. Chaya means animal, but the exact definition of chaya is debated among commentators. Levine renders it a generic term for living creatures, quote unquote. Milgrom, generic term for animals. Paran comments that while the word chaya usually refers to carnivores, here it refers to all animals that walk on all fours. And I like Rashi here. He based on the Sifa, he writes, the expression zot teaches us that Moses held each animal and showed it to Israel, saying, this you may eat and this you may not eat. Similarly, scripture states of fish, this you may eat. Also of the swarming creatures of the waters, he held some of every species and showed them to the Israelites. So too in the case of birds in verse 13, and similarly as regards to the swarming reptiles in verse 29.
Where the hell did he get an octopus in the desert?
Magic.
I have a lot of questions right now.
Maybe he had one of those.
Rabbit.
Maybe he had one of those old school projectors, with the seafood plastic overhead.
Slide.
It got trapped there after the Great Flood. Washed ashore.
Okay, I'm going to continue reading and ignore you guys' interruptions while I'm reading.
Thank you.
No, I
Thank
say,
you.
like verse 8 is a good place to stop.
I said 28, but just
Yeah.
so we
Aaron
didn't cover all
hasn't
of them.
finished his commentary.
Yes, of course. Of course.
Of all the creatures living in the water of the seas and the streams, you may eat any that have fins and scales. But all creatures in the seas or streams that do not have fins and scales, whether among all the swarming things or among all the other living creatures in the water, you are to regard as unclean. And since you are to regard them as unclean, you must not eat their meat. You must regard their carcasses as unclean. Anything living in the water that does not have fins and scales is to be regarded as unclean by you. Okay, so shrimp
Question.
scampi is off the menu. There is no lobster. Crab legs, fuck you. You can't have them. Oysters,
Calamari.
you're sick.
Eels, though.
Eels, no.
No.
Yeah, no crap. That would not be my
What is the point of living?
Man, there are so many translation differences, and I'm sure
Yeah.
each of you guys have different ones. So rabbit in Alter's version is translated as hare. Do hares eat the cud?
No,
Well,
I'll get to
looked
that.
at-
I'll get to that. And please, Aaron, finish this text. And
I
then
was
we'll
curious
comment,
about
please.
that.
All
And,
right,
They aren't.
I guess we'll return to it.
Yes, we'll return to this.
All right, next
Oh,
paragraph.
okay.
These are the birds you are to regard as unclean and not eat because they are unclean. The eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, because I had to specify the black vulture because I already said vulture, but we have to extra special, not the black vulture. The red kite, because you can eat the white kite.
On you have
the red kite.
You did
Any
know
kind of raven.
On you did know there are different kinds of birds, so you need to specify them. Sorry.
You can't eat any kind of raven, not even the blue paisley one.
Odin will be pissed.
Wait, was there something between kite and raven?
Yeah, you
No.
can't
Ravens are
eat the red
intelligent.
kite.
Oh,
Don't
yes,
touch-
there is.
You can't read, and you can't eat any kind of black kite. So not only are there different kinds of birds and different kinds of kites, there's different kinds of black kites. Now what does a kind mean? You can't eat any kind of raven. We got different kinds of raven. Well, even a 5-year-old will tell you they're the same kind, but no, they're different kinds of raven.
4 and 20 black ravens.
Yeah, there's
The horned owl, the screech owl. You can eat the barn owl and the burrowing owl, but not the horned owl or the screech owl.
Weird.
The gull, any kind of hawk. Now we got different kinds of hawks. The little owl. Oh, I guess you can't eat the burrowing owl then, because he says little owl, and burrowing owls are little owls. The cormorant and the great owl. You can't eat the great owl either. And why aren't they in the list of owls? Why don't you just say don't eat owls?
Yeah.
The white owl. You've already. If you just said don't eat owls, then we wouldn't have to go through this list, right? What owls can you eat? Why don't you spare?
Yeah.
You can't eat the osprey. Well, of course not the osprey. Why would we think? The stork. Would anybody eat the thing that brings babies? You
Birth
can't
control.
eat any kind of heron. Now there's multiple kinds of heron.
Wait.
Well, that one actually is true.
Oh my God.
You can't eat the hoopoe, and you can't eat the bat. That's what kind of bird you can't eat. All these other things have feathers, and then we have.
Now, are we talking fruit bats, vampire bats, Malaysian bats?
All
like
kinds of bats.
I think that's where Isaac kind of preempted us, saying, "Hey, bats aren't birds," because he was saying that in the Hebrew that they didn't mean it as birds; they meant it as flying things. The word.
Yeah, and
I mean,
because
the translators, the
because
English
whatever
word
mere
birds
fallible
would have
human
been more
wrote
generic.
this didn't know about the American turkey. Then when they discovered about American turkeys, you have all these rabbis arguing with each other. Can we eat turkeys? I don't know. God, it doesn't say
Yep.
anything about turkeys.
Yep. Some still don't eat it.
It seems that you can eat fowl like chickens, possibly turkeys, ducks, things that eat grains and bugs, but not like things that eat carrion or live mammals.
I don't even
As
think
a
the
general
word.
rule.
I don't even think the word chicken's in the Bible, except for a couple.
No,
places.
it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
'cause
I
if
remember.
it's not
I
talking about
remember
chicken.
Fiddler on the Roof. He goes, well, somewhere it says something about the chicken.
Well, there is like a
Lines in the
general.
movie.
There is like in the Mishnah a general like common denominator among them, but it's not that exact. And I'll get to that.
Well,
Okay.
chickens also were not heavily as domesticated as they are today, and the chickens that we have now are not the same ones that they had back then. It's
No doubt.
a lot thinner. And
I don't know if they even had domesticated chickens in the Middle East by that point.
Hard
They
to
come
say.
from India.
So either.
Well, if
Yeah.
bird meant flying creature, would chickens even count?
Winged.
Oh,
Winged
yeah.
creatures,
Winged,
pretty much
winged.
the words.
I think
The
we
word
kind of.
Hebrew means
Then
what
why
they
aren't
meant.
ostriches on the
too.
list?
It does go into any of the birds later that are the ground birds, and a lot of ground birds still have wings,
Okay.
like ostriches.
Now, the end of verse 20. All flying insects that walk on all fours.
Uh-huh. Checks out.
Bad
Wait,
translation.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Also, their 6 and 8 legs.
All right.
Don't
All
worry,
flying
I'll-
insects that walk on all fours
We'll get
are to be
so much to
regarded as
talk about.
unclean by you and non-existent. And there are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat. Those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground.
Uh-huh.
It says they have legs. In mine, it says those that have legs above their feet. So I think it means like, your grasshoppers and your Your things that have their
Locust.
knees sticking up way above
Well,
their
that-
heads.
Why couldn't it
What?
specify hopping on the grass? That would make then I would know what they're talking about.
It says on the ground. Okay.
Yeah. Of these, you may eat any kind of locust, katydid, cricket, or grasshopper. So there's different kinds of locusts, katydids, crickets, and grasshoppers. There's different kinds of all these things.
Mhm.
But all other flying insects that have 4 legs, you are to regard as unclean.
And imaginary.
You will make yourselves unclean by these. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean till evening. Whoever picks up one of their carcasses must wash their clothes, and they will be unclean until evening. Every animal that does not have a divided hoof, or that does not chew the cud, is unclean for you. Whoever touches the carcass of any of them will be unclean. Of all the animals that walk on all fours, those that walk on their paws are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean until evening. Anyone who picks up their carcasses must wash their clothes, and they will be unclean until evening. These animals are unclean for you.
So evening on what part of the planet? Here?
Just for you, whatever evening is for you.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
I just want to make sure
which microbes, which infectious microbes are strictly diurnal.
Yeah.
That they just shut off and die when the sun goes down. They're solar-powered diseases.
Well, this was before microbes were invented, remember?
Yeah.
This was
At
like
least
bad
you have
air
to
and
wash
shit.
your clothes. In fairness, as Isaac and Tomer and Lawrence have all pointed out in the past, ceremonial cleanliness is something you come in and out of. It's not something you're expected to maintain 100% ceremonial cleanliness all the time. It's just not feasible. But it is interesting that at least in some translations, the word abomination is used for these things that cause ceremonial uncleanliness, which just means you have to wash your hands and you can't go into the temple until the next day.
Okay, before we get too much into any commentary on this, let me run through these accumulated comments. Matt White says, Pilgrim Fathers considered beavers a fish because it lived in the water and had a scaly tail, therefore edible on Friday. Yeah. Tesla Ranger.
My favorite fish, the beaver.
Nom nom nom.
Yeah, so what's that joke about what's the only sort of fish that a priest can eat on Friday? None.
I thought there is an older tradition.
Oh, God.
Isn't there an older tradition that rabbits are considered fish?
But it just beaver works just as well. Tesla Ranger says, is there any differences between kosher and halal other than the name of the god?
A lot. Halal is you make a blessing during slaughter, and they can't eat pig. And I don't know, I think there's something about shellfish as well, but that's about it. Most of them I don't know. But kosher, as we see, there's a lot more rules, and slaughtering is like how it needs to be slaughtered in a very specific way by a trained professional. And then there's also like milk and meat can't be mixed, and yeah, I think that's it. And like, yeah, there's a lot more rules. So anything that is kosher is halal, but not everything that is halal is kosher.
Okay. Kicker White Lion offers 50 Czech kroner and says mosasaurs and meteorynchids are unclean. You heard it here first. And entelodontids might be too. Well, entelodontids definitely are. Because for a number of reasons. They divide the hoof, they don't chew the cud, and they do eat meat. They're predatory. So anyway,
Are
Frederick Agerbo.
pterodactyls?
Can we eat pterodactyl? What was the story?
They're part of the bat kind, according to
Yes.
Frederick Agerbo says,
that.
and Moses said unto the people, we are in the ducking desert without refrigeration. Don't eat seafood.
Fair point.
Admittedly, yes.
Yes, and obviously he has a cell phone spell checker because he's in the ducking desert.
Oh, he's got the office refrigerator.
I think Tom is going to get into this, but a lot of commentators have tried over the century to be like, think of like I think even the Talmud says things like kosher animals are better for health, and those that eat, creepy crawlies and stuff damage their bodies and stuff like that. So they've tried to come up with different explanations, but I think most of them, or like a more modern approach, is kind of it's not about health; it's more about separating the people, making them different.
Well, I have a comment on Paran about this as well. So.
Yeah.
In modern day, that makes more sense. At the time, I can certainly see the sanitary issues for certain of these things.
There might have been an origin to that, and like the pigs.
Yeah.
There's this idea that pigs started out because like pigs were considered a city dwelling thing, and goats and sheep were a shepherd thing.
There were actually
Rural
cities in that region that used pigs as toilets. Like pigs will eat anything, so they had toilets, and the pigs would dispose of the waste by consuming it, literally. So I can understand how the connection of uncleanliness would get in there, because
Yeah, it could just also be like a historical difference. Like we don't eat pig, and it's just historically that those people lived in cities and they ate pig, and we didn't eat pigs because we were, shepherds in the highlands. And then it just became a distinguishing thing about that people, even when they moved to the city, that they still didn't eat pig.
It's sort of like the Buy American thing, right? Like Toyota makes a pickup truck, but your patriotic duty is to buy a Chevy or whatever.
As someone from a Christian background, I would hear some kinds of apologetics that God knew that shellfish might cause allergies or trichinosis, and that's why there's all these kosher laws. But everybody still ate bacon, and everybody still ate lobster.
Yeah,
amongst us Christians.
Jeff Edwards offers $10 and says, if I hadn't read this myself, I would think that Aaron was just making it up as he went along. What a bunch of nonsense.
Well, I would say that some of this nonsense comes from the translation. So I think the JPS acknowledges that some of the birds that are mentioned, they're not definitively identifiable. But unfortunately for you, I did not describe every single one of them. I just described like 2 because they were the most interesting for me. No, 3 actually. No, 2. Sorry.
I have the same note on the hare or rabbit, that the word is arnebeth, and it's
Arnav.
not Arnav.
Arnevet.
Arnevet.
Yeah.
Arnevet, and it's an unidentified animal.
Well,
although it's entirely possible that they were just trying to make an excuse that the Bible couldn't have made a mistake, so it didn't really mean a rabbit.
I actually get to that.
We spoke about this together.
Yes, we did. Okay, I read my first comment on verse 2, but there is another one about that live on land. In the Hebrew Bible reads, Ha-behema asher al haaretz. The term behema is again contested among commentators. Levine and Paran render it that which inhabits the land. Milgrom renders it quadruped, and the BDB dictionary beast or animal or cattle. It's not that defined.
So there's these 2 words that's used in the Bible for animals. One is chaya, which could literally translate as like living thing, and the other one is behema, which sometimes could be translated as cattle, but sometimes also just means animals in general. So
am I hearing what it sounds like? Is this not behemoth?
It
so
derives
behemoth
from
is like
it,
the
but
plural of that word.
Yes, behemoth. Yes, behemoth is like the as Isaac said, the plural for behema. But yes, it's also the name of the either legendary or like the.
Wait, just a moment of clarification, not to side rail, but behemoth is the plural.
But when used in a singular, when used as a singular, it's not a plural. It's it's kind of like the word Elohim, which means God.
Yes.
It's technically a plural, but when used for God, it means like the great God. So behemoth could be thought of as the great animal, not animals plural.
Got it.
Yeah.
But legendary creature.
But
it
on a practical standpoint, in a place of scarcity, it doesn't seem practical to forgo rabbits and hares.
I don't think they were as like they lived in the wild and in the rocky desert, so it wasn't. I don't.
Desert hares would be less prolific, just
at
from
least
a
for high rex, I believe.
I think pigs would have been a bigger thing, like if you.
Well, there are. Yeah, there are reasons for this, especially for the pig, and I'll get to that. But first of all, about verse 3.
Just a second. just with so these two words, just quickly. So
Sure.
when they're used in opposition to each other, chaya is sort of as like wild animals. So irregular carnivores, but also things like deer are considered chaya. And then behema is like domesticated animals. So the horse, donkey, but also, and then all like the regular like cattle, sheep, whatever, are also behema. But sometimes when they're not used in opposition to each other, they can mean like all animals.
Yes, and when you're fighting in kung fu, you want to evoke your animal totem. So make sure to say the Hebrew word for wild animal when you're making your attack.
I still think you're mispronouncing it, because if you get the pronunciation right, you would know that's an irreducibly complex insect, and it's called a behemoth.
Okay, verse 3 about you may eat. So Paran comment, most commentators agree that the essential reason for the animal's cleanness is not in these signs, but was determined by another consideration, while the cud and cloven hoofs are nothing more than external means of identification for those animals. The reason for this, that some animals are considered clean and others unclean, has not been clarified. Some believe that unclean animals were forbidden because other nations worshipped them. According to another hypothesis, unclean animals were sacred to the ancient Hebrews, and their classification as unclean is a remnant of that ancient taboo, which was intended to prevent harm to them. Others see the source of the prohibition in refraining from eating carnivorous animals that drink the blood of the prey, which is considered an ancient taboo. In the course of time, more animals were added to the list of predators according to the living conditions of the wandering Hebrews. But each of these explanations has its contradictions, and each of them has the power to explain only a part of the list, not the whole of it. In particular, these hypotheses do not have the power to explain the distinction regarding the fish, the fowl, and the vermin.
Ancient taboos. That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Goes back to more of a cultural thing at that point.
Now about the hyrax. The Hebrew word for hyrax is shafan. KJV translates it to coney, but Bamberger rejects this reading since it's an archaic word for rabbit. The shafan is generally identified as the rock hyrax. As modern commentators point out, the hyrax does not chew its cud, but gives the impression because it moves its jaws from side to side. Or as Bamberger writes, the biblical writers were not scientific biologists.
No.
One response from Jewish apologetics is that the shafan of the Bible is not the same shafan that we have today. For example, Rabbi Yosef Kafich, in his translation of Saadia Gaon's translation to the Bible, in his note on Saadia's translation of shafan as al-wabar, which means hyrax in Arabic, writes, "It is a small ruminant from the rodent family, which has grayish hair and is very sensitive to cold and heat." And
no, it isn't.
Wait.
He's defining a new animal here.
Yes.
An animal that doesn't exist.
And there's another species that is similar to it, which is not a ruminant and tends to move his lower cheeks, and it looks like it chews its cud. And many are mistaken to call it a shafan and to go astray to talk badly about our holy Torah. And these will not know and will not understand. They shall walk in darkness.
So, okay, we're going to walk in darkness because we know that a hyrax is more closely related to elephants than to rabbits.
What's interesting is that Alter translates this as rock badger.
Shame doesn't translate to honey badger.
Rock badger is used in modern.
Well, that's the same. That's the same name for hyrax.
I think it's considered. It's a word they made up for translations, but it's referring to the hyrax.
Yeah, it's referring to the same one.
So,
did you know that rabbits eat their own poop?
Oh yes, I do, and I'll get to that.
Count?
No, it does not, and I'll get.
I had rabbits when I was younger. Yes, they definitely do.
Okay. However, biblical
strawberries, little buggers.
Okay. Biblical passages which describe the shafan as hiding among the rocks in Psalms 104:18 and Proverbs 30:26, and comparison between other Semitic languages like Thufun in Southern Arabic support the notion that the biblical hyrax is like the modern one.
So essentially, what they did, they argued, if I'm understanding this properly, so they were, in order to make up for this discrepancy, they were essentially arguing for evolution without arguing for evolution.
What?
They said that they had a different one, right?
The problem is that it should be the hyrax, it shouldn't be the coney, and then the problem is that hyraxes don't chew their cud or even look like they chew their cud, unlike rabbits and hares which look like they chew their cud, or at least are pseudo ruminant in a bit. But
it's not
that's
hard to
a big
see.
issue with it.
Give a rabbit some grass or hare some grass and watch him eat it. It looks like it's chewing a cud, but it's not. It's just eating food.
Yeah. So that's the reason for the rabbit, but not for the hyrax. The hyrax is like, I think someone said that he observed the hyraxes for a long time to see if they did it, and there was only like it maybe regurgitated like a tiny drop, but it's like you wouldn't consider that. So that
clearly no investigative research was put into figuring out that they don't do that. It's just interesting that they just say, you just choose cud.
In fairness, this is the cooking chapter, not the biology chapter. So the chef doesn't care what it does in the wild. It's just how does it taste with butter.
No.
Oh no, we can't baste with butter because you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. So no butter on your brisket.
Now about
I shouldn't say that.
now about the rabbit. The Hebrew is arnevet, and it has its Akkadian cognate arnabu. It is usually identified as either the Syrian rabbit, Lepus syriacus, or Judean rabbit, Lepus judae. Again, like the hyrax, it is not a ruminant, but gives the impression because of the sideward movement of its jaws. Some Jewish apologetics...
Wait, Tamer, you correct our Hebrew all the time, and that ruminant, not ruminant.
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 Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. My English is not perfect. Some Jewish apologetics say that the rabbit engages in copophagia, and it's like and this is similar to chewing the cud. This, however, goes against other rabbinic interpretations of cud chewing, like Rashi, Rashbam, and Ibn Ezra say, as regurgitation of the fodder from the animal's stomachs to its mouth and back, as Milgrom says. Now, and the word for chewing the cud, ma'alat gera, ma'ala means to regurgitate, ma'ala is to bring up, and gera, which means cud, it derives from the verb gerar, to pull or drag along. And it may also be related to the word garon, which means throat. So it literally means bringing up from the throat.
Oh. Yeah, penguins do that for their kids. A lot of birds do. Although when I was a kid, I tried to convince my dad that I had multiple stomachs, just like a cow, so that my vegetable stomach was full, but my dessert stomach wasn't.
That's a neat trick.
It's
That's what
a good try.
I just went with the hollow leg thing and just kept eating everything.
Yeah, I guess we'll go back.
Now verse 7, the pig. Milgrom notes that the pig was generally reviled in the ancient Near East, but was also revered in chthonic cults, which penetrated Israel as late as the 6th century BCE. He further writes that the priest rejected the pig because it was an abomination, both aesthetically and culturally. He also writes...
I think that's chthonic.
Chthonic?
English
is so bizarre. It's Chthonic. I don't know.
Exactly. Those cults are cults devoted to the underworld.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those chaotic cults.
Do I need to go get my cultist robe again?
If you want, Tomer. Anytime, let me know. I'm a teacher of that stuff.
Don't worry about it. Okay. He also writes. One must also record that although the pig was singled out as especially abhorrent, it did not become the reviled animal par excellence until the eating of its flesh became a test of the Jews' loyalty to Judaism in Hellenistic times, and 2 Maccabees 6:18 suggests. It is even possible, but is yet unproved, that when Antiochus IV offered up swine on the temple's altar, he was attempting to introduce a new syncretistic form of Dionysiac ritual as proper worship of the, quote, God of heaven, end quote. Finally, following the incident, when a pig was hoisted up the walls of Jerusalem instead of an animal fit for sacrifice, it was decreed in the Talmud Sotah 49b, quote, "Cursed be he who breeds pigs," end quote. A prohibition that was subsequently incorporated into the Mishnah, Bava Kama 7:7.
Man, our ancestors were weird.
And I think the reason that the Bible has prohibited rabbits is because they can never remember, was it only eat rabbits in months with an R in it, or was it never eat rabbits in months with an R in it? I can never get that straight.
It's too bad too, because they breed like rabbits, and something has to eat the little bloody fuckers, or they're going to eat everyone else out of existence. I know they're cute. I'm sorry. It's just.
They definitely eat like crazy. They're cute though, as you said.
Okay, now verses 4 to 7. Rashi and Nachmanides claim that those 4 animals are named because there are no other animals that only have one of the signs. However, as noted previously, the hyrax and the hare are not ruminants, and moreover, Milgrom notes that there are 2 more animals that exhibit only one of the signs: the llama, which is a ruminant whose hoofs are not cloven, and the hippopotamus, who is cloven-hoofed but not a ruminant. He further notes that the hippopotamus existed in the marshy Philistine coastal area, was probably eaten, and that the cleft in its hoofs is so slight that it was missed by the ancients and even omitted by Aristotle in his Historia Animalis.
So, question: does anyone hear some reverb from someone?
Yes, I think it's from Peter.
I do.
It shouldn't be from me.
Hmm.
Here, I'll.
Are we
still here?
Yeah, and llamas, by the way, are
not me.
camels.
I was going to say they're pretty closely related.
Okay, so I want to.
They're all just overgrown sheep.
I did a little bit of research for the phylogeny of this section, so be quick. So,
Oh, look, Isaac does phylogeny. Did anybody know that?
It's a little. So what's interesting is, so the claim is like these are the only animals that have one sign, not the other. And then when people discovered, llamas and peccaries, and they were like, well, these are different animals, and people claimed, oh no, they're more or less the same. Llamas and camels, they're the same kind, and peccaries and pigs are the same kind. But actually, if you look at what we know, what genetic studies have shown, that on one hand, yes, camels and llamas, true genera in the same family, and there are only about 17 million years divergence between them. But actually, peccaries and pigs are not even in the same family. They're in the same suborder. They're 2 separate families, and they diverged 37 million years ago. And so they only superficially look like pigs, but are a completely different family.
Wouldn't it be nice if the Bible would specify all this shit?
You think God knows all this
God's
crap?
fun that way.
Actually, my dad always used to quote the proverb, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter and the glory of kings to search it out." It was, I think, his rationale for why certain things were left for us to investigate.
So there's a what's oh my god, I forgot her name. She was this author of was it early 20th century? She wrote a book called I think the name is Isis Unveiled. Who wrote that one? It was Helena Blavatsky, right? Okay, so she was kind of nuts. This is it was in the late 19th century, but I think it was in this book, may have been another one, that she talks about how the more hidden, the more obscure a text is, the more truth it has. So literally, if something makes less sense, that makes it more true. And that just reminds me of her crazy ramblings.
Divine
I
hiddenness.
should write a book with the word "the" in it and just watch everyone's brain explode.
I'm thinking of like the old palimpsest thing where you'd wash the parchment and then write over it, and then wash it again and then write over it. So like the deepest layers would be the most factually true layers, right?
That is actually true in the case of the calculus that was overwritten to put stupid Christian propaganda together and send out endless lines of hymns rather than the actual scientific knowledge that, after being erased, held us back 1,700 years. Thank you, Christianity.
Yeah, the fact that a previously unknown work by Archimedes laying out the heart of calculus centuries before Newton is just wild, and that was scraped off for him.
Well, to be fair,
hymns.
I know it's unrelated, but like Indian mathematicians have already figured out parts of calculus way before Newton. But well, this is unrelated. I will also say that I apologize for the mistake. This is Milgrom saying it, not me. But I also found that kangaroos are not kosher, but not kosher because they don't chew the cud, but they have split hooves. So that
nice.
They don't have hooves.
They're not really hoofed, are they?
They have paws.
The kangaroos don't have hooves.
They're not
I mean,
okay, so
artiodactyl.
I'll tell you
Our
where I got
hooves are
this.
split.
Okay. I apologize again. This is from Chabad. It's their fault.
Yeah,
Yes, it
I
is.
lived
Okay.
in Australia. That's nonsense.
These I don't know about these questionable
Blackly-
sources, Tomer.
Yeah.
Yes. I know. Isaac is
Its
far more
commentary
familiar with
is
this.
very
because-
questionable, I have to admit.
I feel like
it
they
is.
got it reversed. Like they
surprised
might
because
think that
Chabad-
it chews the cud, but definitely doesn't have a split hoof. I mean, I'm not saying it does
And
chew
the-
the cud. I'm saying
And
it
the
would look like it.
reasons that they
And
give.
Chabad are the ones who
so,
claim that
so
the
there's,
Torah is
there's,
like
there's certain diseases that you
literal.
can get from eating pigs if you don't treat it right, right? You can get the same kind of thing with there's certain diseases you can get from eating people. But the Bible doesn't talk about that. It talks about, you'll eat your babies and everything. It doesn't warn you about kuru. The reasons that they give for a divided hoof and choose the cud, and this is why bats are birds and whales are fish. This is stupid. Why the hell not give like actual reasons for shit?
Because answers are easier to
I
cope
think
with.
the reason is that these
That's
are
it.
clean and these are unclean, and the way to distinguish them is by these signs. It's not the signs that make them clean or unclean. It is all animals with these signs are clean. All animals that don't have these signs are unclean.
Well-
And the reasoning for why they are clean or not is obscure.
Well, all this
sorry.
stuff had to come down to Moses through God, but it was Moses who uttered it. So it could be God rattled off a list that was accurate, and then Moses had a sponge brain and just he didn't want to admit that he forgot half of it, so just kind of word vomited and hoped for the best.
No, Amber,
So
we all know that
Moses
Moses
is
just
going
had a
through-
stutter. That's all.
Moses is going through the notes that God's original thing, and he's going to now translate it from divine language into Hebrew or whatever. But he's going to have to write it again for some reason. Maybe it's in his head, and he has to put it on paper. So he's doing that, and he gets to the part, kangaroos. The fuck is that? That's not even real.
Okay. I'll
Wait,
continue on. Sorry.
I just didn't. One other thing. So
Sure,
with rabbits and hares, by the way, the problem would be if you were to translate Schiffman as a rabbit and Annevet as a hare. Those are not distinct animals. Actually, they're not two different groups. Rabbits and hares are part of the same family, and there is one genus in that family that are commonly called hares, and the rest are called rabbits. But there are exceptions, like jackrabbits are part of the hare genus, and there are other rabbits that are sometimes called hares. So it's not even a distinct category, really. So it would be more problematic if you translate it
They're
as rabbit
closely
and
enough
hare.
related for these purposes. Okay.
Yeah, that they're not
Yep.
distinct. A rabbit.
Well,
a hare
somebody
would be a
earlier
type of
said they were
rabbit.
different species. Indeed,
know.
they are different species.
Oh yeah,
That
there's lots
statement
of
was
there's
correct.
70 species of,
So are we in
of rabbits
gorillas?
and hares together.
Yes, there are multiple species.
So God should have said, "Don't eat lagomorphs."
Yeah, that would have been better.
Well, that would include. Well, I mean, they're forbidden anyway, but I guess it's specifically the leopards that are the ones that look like they chew the cud. I guess pikas and the other lagomorphs that don't look like it. Anyway.
It seems like
And
you're
they probably
only
didn't know they
supposed to
existed.
you're only supposed to eat sort of herd animals that you herd or animals related to that, like a deer that you would hunt or what have you, but nothing you would catch
That's
in a
what's actually
snare.
interesting.
What kind of deer?
The kosher animals, like when we talk about the word animal, doesn't mean mammals, but when we're talking about it now, we're talking about the kosher land animals, which are mammals. They actually form a cladistic group, right? The ruminants, true ruminants, are a group, ruminata, whatever, and every single ruminant is kosher.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, it's technically kosher. I think there are like people who have said like that mouse deer or something are not, but whatever.
I'm sure
So
there's
giraffe.
always lots of edges to argue.
Giraffes are kosher. Okapi is kosher. Bison, buffalo, Oh, actually, I have a list here. Where is it?
Leave giraffes alone.
I would love to have one taxonomic clade mentioned once in the Bible, like an actual one, once.
Well, it's not.
Do you
Yeah,
want
well,
me
there
to-
is,
sorry.
but it's divided in a weird way. I mean, the Bible talks. Well, actually, the Bible names two actual taxonomic clades.
Oh,
One of them from the common ancestor. There's only one that the Bible mentions the universal common ancestor for all of that clade. P-Town, do you know what it is?
I had it, but it's lost.
Pleasure.
I don't know where you're going. What
Okay.
is it?
Well, one that it talks about is birds, but then it talks about all kinds of birds, which
Oh, I
means
see.
that it's not talking about taxonomy anymore. It's talking about as if God had created all these different kinds of birds specially and separately. Why would you do that? Why not just make birds and then let them proliferate? But there's one where you have a clade that starts from a universal common ancestor and then begets all the others. And that's
Fish?
snakes.
Ooh.
Interesting.
This is why you have the danger noodles?
Do you want me to continue my commentary, or do you want to read the comments?
Yes, I should read the comments. How far backed up am I?
7:38 p.m.
Koalas, I think.
No, it's Pantelimon.
One or two.
Yes, Silvio George Pantelimon says, "Are koalas kosher? It would be weird for them to be,
Yeah.
even if,
Yeah, that's from
even
P-Town.
though you could get chlamydia
That's
from them."
me.
Yes. Cool.
Yeah, the Bible should specify for Hebrew people of that time, the Jewish people in the Middle East don't fuck koalas. That would.
The koalas are not kosher. They are not kosher.
You do have two penises, though, so I mean, they get around.
I
then we
think
have
they're
the,
victims. They are smooth-brained. They don't know what they're doing.
They're high all the time on eucalyptus. That's the only thing they'll eat. And if you have a
Their brains don't have the wrinkly bits.
That's because they're high all the time.
yeah.
They're happy.
Oh,
Then Matt White
happy.
says, "Aaron, you know giraffes were thought to be X-breed leopard or crossbreed leopard and camel, hence Latin camelopardus for really? Oh,
No.
that's
The word pardalis, which is where the word leopard
Yeah.
comes from, just means spotted. It doesn't mean, they didn't think it was actually a hybrid. It just means
Thank you.
spotted camel.
There were some weird beliefs about
But then,
hybrids.
since we
They
have
thought it was a type of
sea
camel.
lion and and lionfish and all of these, why not?" And then Mojo says, is it Mojo at no? Okay, yeah, Mojo. Hi, I'm in Morocco. Is there something mentioned about the Berber Imazigan in the Bible of North or North Africa?
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so, no.
The North African ethnicity.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think anything in the Bible.
Yeah,
references
Berbers or Amazigh are not mentioned,
No.
as I'm aware.
I don't believe
Okay.
so.
And then Frederick Agarbo says, "Every time I hear Christian fundamentalists say that the Bible is the ultimate truth, I think about the Don Quixote quote, 'Facts are the enemies of truth.'" I get you
Hell
one
yeah.
better.
Hell yeah.
I was listening to Rabbi Manis Friedman yesterday, who said almost the exact same thing. When he's saying that you can just that science is not our master, you can ignore science, you can ignore facts, and believe what you want. He didn't say it that way, and it took him a lot longer to say it, but that's what he said.
I don't like Manus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait,
So. Oh.
I wanted to add, since we got to the a short Christian cultural note here to the end of that chapter. Acts chapter 10 has, I always say Paul, but it's Peter. He had a vision of all of these unclean animals descending on a sheep, and God told him to eat it. And I think a lot of Christians take this for justification why they eat bacon and stuff like that because of the dream in Acts 10. But it was even if you read through the chapter, it was about him visiting a Roman who, and we haven't gotten to this part yet, they considered Gentiles unclean.
Yeah.
And so that was Cornelius centurion, that he was a God-fearing man, and normally he wouldn't be able to visit them because Gentiles were ritually unclean, I guess.
So don't eat Gentiles. or
I
touch
don't
the
think-
carcasses.
I don't think,
God was
I
trying to
don't
tell
think,
me if I
I
said
don't think
clean.
that, I don't think they're rich.
I'm unkosher.
Humans. I think there is actually a discussion about whether human is considered part of animals in this chapter, meaning that because they don't have fins, they don't have hoofs and chew the cud, they're unclean to eat. But they argue that they're not. Humans are not called chaya; they're called nefesh chaya, which means like a living soul, and so they're not considered part of that category. So if you have a cut in your lip, for example, you're allowed to suck the blood out. It's not forbidden to you. The blood of a human is not technically forbidden,
Even though it says earlier, never eat blood. Period.
This is what it says in verse 27 and 28
because it's
of
not the
Acts
same
10.
thing.
While talking with him, Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people. He said to them, "You're well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean."
Honestly, this is obviously a hit piece for the Pauline side of Christianity. They'll let the Gentiles in without having to observe all the kosher laws and cut up their dicks. We'll have great marketability that way. But yeah, if God came down in a vision and said it was okay, then we're all good.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
there would have been a thing about
how Rome got
associating and eating
converted.
together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, eating
okay.
together.
What about eggs?
The eggs of a
Jewish
kosher
foods.
animal are kosher.
Where in the Bible does it say that?
We'll get to it later on. There's a bit about
Might be in Deuteronomy,
Powell
maybe.
and their young.
actually.
Okay.
Okay, verse 8. Their carcasses. In Hebrew, nivlatam, derived from nevela. Levine comments, the term nevela is ambiguous because it can designate the carcass of an animal or human being, and because it does not indicate the cause of death, whether by natural means or by being killed or slaughtered in some way. However, in some contexts, it refers specifically to animals that died a natural death. Here, the sense is general. Not only is one prohibited from eating the meat of forbidden animals, but also from touching or handling any part of their bodies, as would normally occur in preparing meat as food. This rule was undoubtedly intended as a safeguard against possible consumption of meat from such prohibited animals. In Leviticus 17:15 and Deuteronomy 14:21, we find the prohibition against eating the flesh of any animal that died or was torn by beasts.
Yeah, and on the connections with Deuteronomy, so there, which chapter of Deuteronomy is it? Deuteronomy 14. So there are a lot of similarities between Deuteronomy 14 and Leviticus 11. So this has been explained a couple ways, but generally everyone has argued for dependence from one or the other. So I think Milgrom, for example, views Deuteronomy 14 as an abridgment of Leviticus 11, but then other scholars view Leviticus 11 as an expansion on Deuteronomy 14. And honestly, it could go either way, and I would have to look kind of deeper into many of the arguments, but as a general baseline, I kind of think that Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomistic history served as the basis for a lot of the Torah stuff. So I generally would accept that as the base, but it is interesting because it is so very similar. There's just like a few differences here and there.
Yep.
Verse 9. Yeah. Verse 9. Chazal, in the Talmud Nida 51b, admit that the criterion of fins is superfluous, since according to the Mishnah Nida 6:9, all fish that have scales also have fins. Milgrom suggests that the criterion for fish is so worded, and for the other animals as well, to emphasize the means of locomotion, on the assumption that the animals which are permitted move in a way that is natural to their environment.
So on this, Mary Douglas has proposed that what underlies the dietary prohibitions is a general commitment of the Israelite mindset to set clear and distinct categories, we wish, forms of animal life that appear to be ambiguous instances of their particular zoological class may not be eaten. That proposal seems a little strained for the land animals because it is not self-evident that a non-ruminant with hooves, such as the pig, is somehow a violation of the category land animal. Her argument is more plausible for sea creatures and perhaps also for amphibians and reptiles. Fish possessing fins and scales that are are the exemplary category instance of denizens of the water, yet the sea swarms with polymorphous creatures and shells and plasmic blobs and tentacles that seem altogether unlike fish. And from this, the Israelites are enjoined to distance themselves. It is noteworthy that terms from the creation story abound here: swarming creatures, according to its kind, gathering of water, stirs. The dietary laws are framed to make a statement about the Israelites' place in the created order of things that is a kind of qualifying addendum to the priestly panorama of creation in Genesis 1. And I believe we covered this before a little bit, but there was this idea that a lot of these laws were meant to distinguish them from the other groups in the area, that in order to stand apart from them, they had to have different practices. So there might be a bit of that in there as well, but it goes along with the pea creation story.
So, are we allowed to eat catfish?
I mean, you are. According to the Bible, these laws are for the Israelites. The Israelites cannot eat catfish because they don't have.
Okay,
scales.
Tomer, are you allowed to eat catfish?
Why are you asking me?
No.
Also, where are we on
Go ahead.
sharks? Because I know they don't have like traditional scales, but they've got that textured. What is
They
it?
don't actually have
They
the
have fins.
tentacles. Yeah, they're not considered. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
don't
not
actually
ray
talk about-
finned either. They have different types of fins. Although the most primitive of sharks did have ray fins, but they were not cartilage. They were cartilaginous, so they're not. Why am I even bothering getting into that? Nobody's going to know. So you've got the channel cat, which does not have scales. So are we allowed to eat catfish? And then we would have to specify, well, if you can eat catfish because it has both fins and scales, well, then can you eat a channel cat? Because a channel cat doesn't have scales.
Is
I
there
think
any?
catfish are not considered to
I don't
have
think
any.
I've ever had catfish.
Oh, you should
I
try
think
it.
no part of Southern cuisine is kosher.
I made halibut last night.
I think there is a
Lauren,
thing that
you
like
should
what
tell
is
me
it?
how
I think
halibut evolved.
Yeah, well, in the trailer
One
parks
day.
I grew up in, we ate catfish.
Yeah. Well, with that, I
Yeah,
gotta scoot. I gotta go collect some children. I'll catch y'all next time.
Take it
All right,
easy.
Yeah.
peace out.
Bye.
yeah, I think practically speaking, like Jewish people, they'll buy fish that has scales, and it will normally be like scales that are like the ones that you can just scrape off. If they're like kind of solid, almost like scoots, like on a pike or a sturgeon, I think those are not considered kosher. So
Interesting.
definitely catfish that don't have like any.
So are
scales.
catfish kosher?
I don't think so. I don't think they have
No,
scales.
I think they don't. Yeah, they don't have scales.
There are
I'm correct.
catfish that have scales, and then there are
Well,
catfish that don't.
I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of this from Noon. I don't know if that's the same one.
Catfish do not have scales. Their bodies are often naked. There might be there might be kosher species that look like catfish. That are native to
No.
Americas.
I was reading that there was catfish scales, but nope. They said their bodies are often naked, but catfish typically, apparently, do not have scales. I was seeing one that was a difference where there are scaleless catfish, and these were specified scaleless. So I have assumed if they're specifying which catfish are scaled, that implies that some of them have scales.
Hmm.
Okay. So, do you want me to continue, or do you want to read the comments because I'm seeing them piling up?
Yeah, I'll read the comments here. All right. So Frederick Agarbo says, every time I hear Christian fundamentalists say that the Bible is the ultimate truth, I think about oh wait, I read that one. And M. Doug says, I'm pretty sure Yahweh thinks babies are fair game.
Maybe
Hey,
for him.
listen, once we get to Deuteronomy 28, I mean it's as a punishment, but yeah, he's all for that. Yeah.
Baby back, ribs.
Eyeshadow Z40 offers $5. Thank you. And says, all I hear in this chapter is how priests claiming to be the sons of Aaron want their barbecue. Nothing goes to the man who led them out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mojo says, fun fact, Pharaoh Shishak is kind of mentioned in the Bible. He was a Berber, St. Augustine, and maybe church council in North Africa too. And the story of elephants sounds like Handal Berber.
About
Hannibal.
Shishak is mentioned, but I doubt about.
But Hannibal was not a Berber, first of all.
Yeah, he wasn't.
He was
I don't think
Carthaginian.
so.
He was Semitic, actually. He was Hannibal.
Yeah, but he is mentioned in the Bible. That is, by the way, Shishak's like invasion, I guess, like in the early 10th century BCE, was a real thing that happened, and it is recorded in the Bible.
Yeah,
I think in the Bible he's called Shawshank or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sable Eagle, catfish is not kosher because you don't eat the sewage treatment system, according to a Jewish guy I asked about it in Vietnam about 20 years ago. And there's the most reliable possible source. A Jewish guy I asked in Vietnam 20 years ago.
In fairness, I can support the logic on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll continue. Verse 10, swarming things in the water. The Hebrew is sheretz hamayim. According to Levine, the verb sharat is cognate with the Akkadian sharatzu, which means to come to life, crawl, or swarm. Milgrom, citing Snaith, writes that sheretz is a collective noun which includes all small creatures that go about in shoals and swarms, insects that fly in clouds, such as gnats and flies generally, and small creatures such as weasels, mice, and lizards that are low on the ground.
Who is he citing?
Snaith.
Snaith?
Snaith, S-N-A-I-T-H.
The potions master in Hogwarts.
That's what I heard.
I just needed to make sure.
Okay. Paran notes that the root shin ret tzadik denotes a huge multiplicity, as seen in Genesis 8:17 and Exodus 1:7. And so sheretz hamayim refers to the sea creatures that reproduce very quickly.
And it might be related to the ancient tradition belief that certain small animals like maggots, for example, spontaneously generated, and that's probably why the words
that's a good point
are connected. At least in the
That does make sense.
Akkadian.
I should also say that Snaith that I mentioned is Norman Snaith.
Okay.
Verse 12.
So are
comment-
plesiosaurs kosher?
I don't know what these are, Aaron. I'm not a zoologist. I'm a mathematician. Give me a break.
Like Nessie, the Los Angeles monster.
Long-necked
Plesiosaur.
swimming monsters, often confused with dinosaurs.
They don't have
That's
fins
why
and
I said
scales.
I don't know what this is.
But
Okay.
they were on the ark, weren't they?
No, because they could swim.
But they had the breath of life.
That means so good the fish.
Oh yeah, I
I'm
don't know if
not putting a
Christians.
blue whale on
I
the
don't-
ark.
Lilith, I don't know if Christians believe this, but I remember being taught that like the sea creatures survived the flood because the water around the ark was like kept at the right temperature and salinity for them.
Oh,
So there was a pair of each sea creature that was next
like
to the ark,
swimming
Yeah.
around.
and there was like fresh water and salt water. I don't know.
And so all the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and mosasaurs and all these things just went extinct immediately. And God had already said that everything that has the breath of life would be on the ark.
He likes to play with his food and spread out his genocide.
Yeah. According to creationists that say that those things were living at thousands of years ago and not millions of years ago, then yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But,
Okay, verse 12. Milgrom comments, this verse is an abridgment of verse 10. What is the need for this repetition? The rabbis claim that verse 10 is limited to Yamim and Nechalim, seas and rivers. Other bodies of water, such as ponds, marshes, and reservoirs, are covered in this verse by the designation in water, as the Sifa and Ibn Ezra note. The striving for comprehensive coverage, characteristic of this chapter, is responsible for duplication. Here, lest it be thought that the criteria for fish are limited to seas and rivers, as verses 9 and 10 indicate, another verse is added, verse 12, to include all bodies of water.
Quick question. Is anybody in this group not wearing earbuds or headphones?
I'm wearing headphones.
Are you hearing echo from me?
I'm hearing, yeah.
So mighty. You
Is
wanna
it from
mute
me, guys?
We don't know. You want to
Mute
mute?
If you're
yourself.
not wearing earbuds or headphones, then it must be from you.
Testing.
Oh,
That sounds better. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Good.
Wow. Of course, Mighty Chicken. Of course. See the whole time.
Okay, verse 13, the bird, Hebrew ha'of, which could designate flying creatures, as the
Sorry,
David
guys.
dictionary says. Okay. According to the Mishnah Chulin 3:6, the common denominator among all the impure birds is that they are dores. While more specific meanings of this term were given by later commentators, it refers in general to predatory carnivores. This, however, is contrasted by the non-predatory carnivores in the list, like the raven, stork, hoopoe, and bat. According to Milgrom, the common characteristic of these birds is that they are raptors, consumers of either carrion, live prey, or both, except for the hoopoe and bat, which were considered taboo because of their dirty habits and inedibility.
They were considered. Wait, hold on. Their inedibility was considered. Okay, so so you shouldn't eat them because they're inedible.
They're icky.
Was that
Because
part
because of their dirty habits and inedibility. Yes.
Right. So you shouldn't eat them because they shouldn't be eaten. At least the second part of that, inedibility.
Yes. That's
okay. That's quite.
I guess bats and hoopos were considered by most people not to be like something that you eat. So it was
I'm
just added on
fine
the
not
list.
eting the flying rat. We're good.
I like the flying
Fine.
rat. That's true. Flying rats are great.
Flying rat.
A little rabies never hurt anybody.
I thought flying rats were pigeons.
In New
That's
York,
what we
they
call them in
certainly
London.
are.
M-Dog offers 10 pounds and said emoji as a hippo character. Someone I can't see the graphics. As emoji
Yes, a
as a
description of
hippo
it.
character with a pink hat, flips it backward and raises his thumb in the air. Okay, I did see that one.
Now, I didn't detail all the birds because I'm not that awful, but I have two interesting things about to say. The first is about the horned owl in the NIV. In Hebrew, it's Bat Hayana, which literally means the daughter of the desert in Arabic. While the Septuagint, Peshitta, and Targums identify it as the ostrich, and in modern Hebrew it also means ostrich, Milgrom says that this rendition must be abandoned since ostriches do not haunt ruins as do owls.
So, question here. Is that the same word that is so in the KJV? I think it's translated as screech owl. There's this passage in Isaiah, and it's translated as screech owl, but it's of course the word Lilith. I wonder if it's the same word on one hand, but at the same time, it was just really interesting to see this. I think Aaron's translation had screech owl in it, and I was like, "Oh, is that the same word as?" It can't be the same word as Lilith because Lilith is that passage in Isaiah is the only place where it says Lilith. Yeah,
the name
Oh,
Lilith.
I see. So you're saying Lilith is translated as screech owl, and then Batyana here in the owl list is also translated as screech owl.
Right.
So it must be, but it's a different word.
It's obviously
Hebrew is different
What
words
verse
for
are we
sure.
talking about? Do you know?
I forget the passage in Isaiah, but if a quick Google search should show it. But but I'm pretty sure the word there is Lilith. 100% actually, the word there is Lilith.
Yeah, night owl, night creature is another.
Right, that could be
translation for that
translated a whole bunch of
Gentlemen, confirmation. I am unkosher.
ways. Well, you're not in this list.
Sorry.
Okay,
and-
but some of the translations, right? So we have. I'm just going to list over the names of some of the animals that how Alter translates it. So he's got eagle, vulture, black vulture, kite, buzzard, every raven, ostrich, nighthawk, seagull. And the hawk according to its kind, horned owl, cormorant, puff owl, hoot owl, pelican, fish hawk, stork, heron, hoopoe, and bat.
The KJV.
Most of these don't have a specific answer.
When we get to like the
I noticed Tomer's list
sorry.
is slightly different than the one I read.
Yep, all of them are different.
Yes, all of them different, and I could go about every one of them, but again, time constraints. I'm not going to waste your time. Verse 19 about the hoopoe. The Hebrew is duchifat, and I have Savage Ibn Ezra here. The Sadducees say that the duchifat hoopoe refers to the chicken. However, they are the world's greatest fools. For who told them this? Well, funny enough, Rashi says, and the Peshitta, Chizkuni, and Gersonides all render the duchifat as wild cock.
Oh, yes. I love me some of that wild cock.
That would be interesting if the wild cock was considered not kosher.
I should change my name to Wild Cock.
That's way better than Mighty
Mighty
Chicken.
Cock.
I think so too.
We are.
verse-
We never grow up, do we?
No.
There's no other way to keep this readable.
Yeah, the
It's more fun
the
this
thing
way.
to take out of this list is that the word min, which a lot of creationists say means kind, is more likely to be more similar to a species than anything else. The kites, according to their, or the falcons, according to their variety, or the hawks, according to their kind, or whatever, it's more like the species than anything else. And the idea that the word min in the Bible refers to like a whole family is almost definitely not intended by the writers.
So what I
Nonsense.
remember when Arn had one of his debates with Hovind was Hovind explaining his ideas, right? And Arn's like, okay, well, it sounds like what you're describing are clades. Like, and you kept saying it, and he just didn't understand it.
Hovind doesn't understand any word that he has not invented his own mutilated definition of.
Can I
He
say
does know the
that?
word okay, though.
Can I say that
that
while
one the
talking
most.
about wild cocks, Arn said we never grow up while stroking his snake. Sorry, had to do it.
Yeah,
you want
sometimes
me to
I
continue,
saw
or-
somebody comment
Oh,
that
sorry.
well, never mind. I can't go into that family show. All right, continue. I'm going to need to read another comment.
Yeah,
Eric
yeah.
Wander says, question, maybe you answered it already. I was late. Do Jewish people have to keep Leviticus 11 entirely? What about all the other laws?
So I actually watched a very interesting video yesterday by Useful Charts about the different types of Jews. And it's actually a pretty good description that he brought up, which was there are three main types of Jews: Reform, what is called conservative,
Conservative
and Orthodox. And the main differences between these three types, it's not like they're not really denominational differences, but the main difference is that Orthodox see the Bible or the Jewish halacha, the law, as like binding and unchanging. Conservatives see the law as binding, but it can change. So they might say something like, the Bible says you can't work on the Sabbath, or you can't eat these certain things. But now with modern technology, driving a car on the Sabbath, it's not work, so they'll allow it. Or eating certain foods is fine because we have modern health standards or whatever. And then and then Reform are like, it's not binding and it's not changing. So and it changes. So so for them, they'll say each person takes upon themselves what they want to keep and what they don't want to keep, and that's kind of the main differences. So a lot of Jews, especially I think most Jews in America, are Reform, so they don't consider this law to be something they have to keep. So they're happy to eat.
Most Jews in Israel are Orthodox, or at least
Orthodox?
at least the religious ones. Yeah.
Yeah, Silvio George Pentelamon said, our
Oh,
BJ's
sorry.
kosher, and I just have to address that. I don't think you're allowed to eat sausage. Already.
Kosher sausage is made from
It
beef.
depends.
We
Actually,
get
prefer
to we
beef
get to
sausage.
that in Songs of Solomon, Arn. Apparently it is.
But
So
we did specify that you are allowed to eat beaver.
Yep.
Well, now I hear an airplane. What the hell?
That's my fault.
Perfect.
Sorry, I got a full house right now, and it's the only spot I can find outside.
Minute Rice offers $6.66. It says, wow, Leviticus is boring. At least there's some good color commentary. Anywho, I'm going to commit some blasphemy by frying bacon extra spicy.
I personally, I'm hearing background noise again. Maybe it's Mighty Chicken.
Someone's doing some construction. Sorry, I'll stop.
Okay. I'll be on the opposite opinion and say that I find Leviticus very interesting because it's wild, and that's what makes it interesting.
I find Leviticus interesting too because it says a lot of crazy shit.
That's it. Yeah. But it's also fascinating to read just what they believed. I don't know. It's investigating a civilization.
Yeah, it's
what they
interesting
believed
that,
at the time. You mean like in context with their history and
The thing is, that is all definitely. Like, the thing is, this is why, like, while reading it itself by itself is honestly kind of boring. when you look past the text, when you look through the page, not literally, you know what I mean, then you start to get the ideas about how the ancient Israelites lived and what they thought, and then it gets more interesting because you can put it into this bigger historical context and their bigger cultural milieus. So that's what I find. That's where I find the value in studying the Bible. I know like a whole bunch of atheists are going to be like, "Oh my God, studying the Bible, that's like studying like a fiction." And you know what? Like, and you could say that, but at the same time, this is like what a culture actually believed for a very long time. Like these are remnants from that, and we can learn about them through this text. So it's a piece of,
and a lot of this still affects us today.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Not necessarily this as much, but like Leviticus, there's a lot of shit that goes down today that
I can think
are
of
all
one
about quoting Leviticus.
Yeah, I can think of one specific verse.
Yeah, I can think of more than one.
Yeah.
One example we can see where about how like this list is like very specific to the time and place and not like for the whole world is that there's lots of different types of owls in this list, and which kind of makes sense when you're talking about people living in like the Middle East, the desert and stuff like that. Different types of owls, or would have been different types of birds, and then in English. Oh, Aaron's gone. Oh,
Yeah, he was done with his shit.
He grabbed a snake and something else to log them out.
What happened?
Does that make me the
Oh no!
I think Lorence has seniority.
Yeah.
Aaron has made it very clear that should anything befall him, Lorence is our second in command.
Sure.
Yeah.
God hath smote him.
Oh,
There he is.
never mind. There he is.
And he is risen.
Well, it was a good rain while it lasted.
He is risen indeed.
Okay. I see more comments. Do you want to read them? Or?
Yeah. Let me see where I was with that. I don't know why my computer just decided. I think I'll reboot now. That was interesting. Okay, so there's the thing of sable eagle, catfish not kosher, hippo character. I'm trying to figure out where I was. All right,
right after minute, right?
Yeah, minute right.
Yeah. Chikuhitsu, I guess is what that means. Didn't expect a debate on whether or not it's okay to eat Lilith.
I'll remember that for when I.
This is a family show.
Oh God, that was too loud. Too loud.
Who, I was too loud? Me?
Yeah,
it's very, very loud.
Yes.
Sorry.
And another comment?
I don't see the other comment.
Jason Jones?
Oh, it must have, you must have put it on there while you were gone.
How loud can Aaron Ra yell bacon in a sepulchral scream?
No.
Okay, back to
testing.
Hold on a second.
Do I sound better now?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry guys.
What verse are we on now in chapter 11?
29.
I'm commenting on 20.
29, and you're commentating on 20, and it's 12:25. Will we make it to chapter 12 today?
Nope.
Probably not.
We should finish chapter 11, but
yeah. Okay, go ahead, Tomer.
Okay.
I don't know why it is, but when we get to chapter 11, I feel bankrupt.
Verse 20, flying insects that walk on all fours. So Paran comments, flying insects, Hebrew shelets, also refer to small winged animals whose body is close to the earth as they move on the ground, such as Rashi says, flies, hornets, gnats, and grasshoppers. Most of these creatures have more than 4 legs, but scripture mentions those that walk on all 4 to distinguish them from the birds previously mentioned, all of whom have 2 legs. The meaning of this writing is therefore at least 4 legs, and this is also what Milgrom notes.
Mm-hmm.
So we ignore what it says and we put the justification in so that we didn't have a contradiction. So
I mean, I've heard another explanation, which is that these species are, even though they have 6 legs because they're all insects, they all have 2 jumping legs and 4 walking legs, I guess you could say. And that was their explanation, that this is specifically a subgroup within insects that walk on 4s.
Which
Well,
I kind of get.
sorry.
I mean, having eaten a few crickets and grasshoppers myself, I can understand why they would specify you can eat these bugs, but maybe not all these others.
Well, I think there's a verse in Psalms, right, where it talks about the spider having hands. So maybe the
I have heard the excuse
maybe
that
the
2
Bible
are hands.
interprets insects having 4 legs and 2
No,
arms.
I think they're talking about what.
The hopping
Oh,
ones.
what? I wish I could remember what they
insects
call that.
don't use their front legs. That is true. Like praying mantises, for example, they use their 2 front legs as to catch insects. But
Yeah,
grasshoppers and locusts use the front 4.
I can't remember the proper name for it. There's a group of
I was in Proverbs, Pete Down. You think of Proverbs.
they're
Right,
cave
yeah.
spiders, which are actually not spiders, but they're arachnids. But there are cave spiders that have hands.
That's really creepy.
Okay.
How did the
verse-
Bible know?
sorry.
No, just joking.
Okay, verse 22. The
We're
locust.
talking about the papillaries, or maybe.
The locust. Milgrom comments, the reason for exempting the locusts is not clear. It may be related to Israel's pastoral life in its pre-settlement period, when the community subsided on its herds, as well as on the sporadic visits of locusts, just as Bedouin do to this day. Indeed, it should be remembered that one inhabitant of the wilderness, John the Baptist, made, quote, locusts and wild honey, end quote, his exclusive fare, according to Matthew 3:4 and Mark 1:6, and that Yemenite Jews still eat fried locusts. Well, I am half Yemenite Jew, and I don't eat fried locusts, but I do know that back in Yemen, they did.
Yeah,
I got a good
they have
sauce for that if you
tradition-
try it.
They have a tradition to know which species are actually considered kosher, and there's no one really knows which of these species are which species, but Yemenites have a tradition that these species that we eat are these 4 species mentioned.
We've eaten crickets before, and they taste kind of nutty if you fry them in butter with garlic. But the legs get caught in between your teeth. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good source of protein. Don't knock it,
We were doing a charity telethon, and we decided to do this thing to trying to raise money. And my son was involved, and they asked my son, what do crickets taste like? And he said, chicken, sharp, pointy chicken.
I don't
I
think
ate
that's
one.
true. I think they taste kind of nutty.
Because we were eating the whole thing, of course. And so the next time we made chicken, or the next time we had crickets, I went out of the pet store, bought this huge bag of live crickets and put them in the freezer. And then I sat there and spent like a day pulling them up. So we don't have the legs, we don't have the carapace, we only have the abdomen, right? So just like a bowl of cricket butts. And it took me for forever to clean like these hundreds of crickets to get this little bowl of cricket butts, and it still wasn't enough. So we had to mix in shrimp.
Ugh.
So the only way to eat cricket effectively is to eat it is eat the whole thing.
Ugh.
But it was the best vindaloo we did a shrimp vindaloo sauce, and it was insanely spicy. It was brilliant.
Great. Now I can't eat lunch. Well, I thought
I'll
I
be
was
opening
gonna...
a restaurant soon.
On that note,
I'm not.
All right, Tommy, you want to go into the types of locusts or no?
Oh, no, I'm just quoting just the locust, because again, I could, but I shouldn't. About verse 24, Bamberger comments, as the text stands, defiled persons need not purify themselves actively. They must simply avoid contact with the holy until sunset, by which time the impurity will be dissipated. That is how some modern scholars understand the passage. But Sifra may well be correct in understanding that persons require a ritual bath yet are not completely purified till sunset.
I just figure it's if you got Montezuma's revenge, you're just, isolated for that period.
And
I
finally,
just feel like
sorry.
all of this is this chapter is super picky, you know, and it's like you're just really having people obsess on this stuff and living in people's minds over whether they're clean or unclean about whatever animal. You know, it's just wholly unnecessary to me.
Yeah. I think we may have to extend today's show just to get through this chapter.
Yeah, okay.
Seems that way, yeah.
Yeah, I think
loud.
Lawrence mentioned how that this bit is very similar to Deuteronomy, and I'm not sure if Deuteronomy doesn't talk about the spirit, the impurity as much, but it makes sense that in this we're talking about the Levite, the priests and stuff, that, you know, Aaron distinguishes between the pure and the impure, so it would make sense to stick this bit in here, and kind of go into detail more about the impurity side, not just you can't eat this, it's also about the impurity that you get from touching their dead bodies, for example.
Oh, just for Mighty Chicken,
On
can
that
you
note,
can you
that-
turn down your mic a little because you're blasting loud. You're
Yeah,
going
you
to
are
ruin
loud.
people's ears.
Yeah, blowing my doors, good buddy.
Mighty Chicken is muted though. I know. You have to be because the background thingamawhat's it.
Hey, who wants to read about reptiles?
Wait.
I do.
I have one final thing. That is Savage Ibn Ezra. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Savage Ibn Ezra. In verse 26, there is a type of misbeliever who belongs to the Sadducee heresy who says that, quote, everyone that touches them, quote, means whoever touches them while they are alive shall be unclean. There is no need to respond to insane talk, for scripture only prohibited their flesh.
I think there is a thing though, when it comes to Shretzim, like the creepy stuff, not creepy stuff, whatever, the creeping small animals, whatever. Maybe that's the next section.
How are you supposed to
yeah,
kill
I
a
think
fly
so.
then?
Yeah, okay.
It is the next section, yes.
Yeah, so the next section, I think there is a thing about even if they're alive, touching them is
Yeah.
But okay.
Okay, how do I sound right now?
You're still a bit loud.
Okay.
Mighty Chicken,
But you're
what
not as
might be
bad
the
as you used to
case?
be.
What might be the case is because there's a lot of background noise on your end, and if you have in StreamYard, you have checked automatically adjust volume. StreamYard will kick it up because it will try to put the background noise on. So maybe uncheck that.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right,
and I was thinking about I mentioned earlier about about cave spiders. It's one of the common names. I looked it up. It's Amblypygi, and they're also called whip spiders. And they really do. They're fucking hideous. I want to get one of these things as a pet because they seriously are just so incredibly ugly. They're beautiful, but they have hands. They'll give you nightmares.
I think I might know
That's
about this.
I say that about myself a lot.
All right, last time. Do I sound okay now? Or is it still
Yes.
out?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Good,
All right. So, verse
Before you continue,
29.
there is but before we continue, there is another comment. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a comment.
All right, another comment.
message.
Where was it? Silvio Georges Pantelimon gives $6.66 with no message.
It's Romanian Leo.
Romanian who?
Romanian
Lei.
Lei. Sorry. Lei.
I don't see that comment here.
And
RON.
RON.
and to annoy Tomer, there wasn't a comment.
Okay, so it's not dollars. So that's what you meant. The RON.
No, but it's the money. It's Romanian Lei.
I'm just
Oh.
Got
pulling
it.
your leg.
It makes it even more.
All right,
Everybody's
let's
pulling my
read.
leg.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
All right, there we go.
29.
Yes, of the animals that move along the ground, these are unclean for you. Now, so
Oh,
the
we don't
giraffes
even-
or all of the other all the mammals and stuff that we just talked about, those don't move along the ground.
No,
Apparently
that's the shelets. That's the shelets.
Kind of
it's
implies
again
like
the translation
crawling
is
on the ground, like
We're
The
talking
crawling
about
on the
creepy
ground.
crawlies.
yeah the
Oh,
shelets.
the clade of creeping things.
Yes.
All right.
yeah.
Of the animals that move along the ground, these are unclean for you. The weasel, the rat, any kind of great lizard, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the wall lizard, the skink, and the chameleon. Of all those that move along the ground, these are unclean for you. Whoever touches them, when they are dead, will be unclean until evening. When one of them dies and falls on something, that article, whatever its use, will be unclean, whether it's made of wood, cloth, hide, or sackcloth. Put it in water; it will be unclean till evening, and then it will be clean. If one of them falls into a clay pot, everything in it will be unclean, and you must break the pot. Any food you are allowed to eat that has come into contact with water from any such pot is unclean, and any liquid that is drunk from such a pot is unclean. Anything that one of their carcasses falls into becomes unclean. An oven or a cooking pot must be broken up. They are unclean, and you are to regard them as unclean. A spring, however, or a cistern for collecting water remains clean, but anyone who touches one of these carcasses is unclean. If a carcass falls on any seeds that are to be planted, they remain clean. But if water has been put on the seed and a carcass falls on it, it is unclean for you. If an animal that you are allowed to eat dies, anyone who touches its carcass will be unclean until evening. Anyone who eats some of its carcass must wash their clothes, and they will be unclean till evening. Because that's the thing you need to do when you eat roadkill. Do your laundry. Anyone who picks up the carcass must wash their clothes and will be unclean until evening. Every creature that moves along the ground is to be regarded as unclean. It is not to be eaten. You are not to eat any creature that moves along the ground, whether it moves on its belly or walks on all fours or on many feet. It is unclean. Do not defile yourselves by any of these creatures. Do not make yourselves unclean by means of them, or be made unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves to be holy, because I am holy. Do not make yourselves unclean by any creature, things that I made, that move along the ground. I am the Lord who brought you out of Egypt to be your God. Therefore be holy, because I am holy.
Sounds like something that Trump would say.
It sounds like I carried you in my belly for 9 months, and that's what I'm getting.
Yeah.
These are the regulations concerning animals, birds as if they're separate from animals, and every living thing that moves about in the water, and every creature that moves along the ground is distinguished from animals somehow. You must distinguish between the unclean and the clean, between living creatures that may be eaten and those that may not be eaten.
I think with the moving on the ground thing, the KJV says creepeth. They're talking about the creeping things.
Yeah.
Not just like anything that moves on the ground. Like
but like, would you
like
consider a monitor lizard as being a creeping thing?
I mean, they do kind of
creeps along the ground.
Yeah, but how are weasels
sidewalk
in that category?
I don't know, but they creep along the ground.
My Bible actually specifically says small beasts. So these are the small beast crawling on the ground that you are to hold unclean. The mole, the rat,
what version are you reading?
I am reading this monster, which is the Jerusalem Bible. That is the Catholic version that you would get, and my dad had.
Okay, I want to hear verses 30 and 31 from you.
Very good. I'll start at 29 because it's easier to start the chapter. These are the small beasts crawling on the ground that you are to hold unclean: the mole, the rat, the several kinds of lizards, gecko, koa, letta, chameleon, and tinsum. Was it tins?
Yeah, it's transliterating the Hebrew. So
yes, tinsameth. Well, I don't.
Tin Shemet. Tin Shamet. Sorry. Tin Shamet.
I have tortoise in mind.
Letter. So yeah, letter.
Letter. Yes. So
yeah, I was wondering whether we
it also has sub-chapter sections too. So it says further rules on contact.
So verses 30 and 31 in any other, did anybody notice any variance in your different versions?
I noticed that the KJV kind of butchers the sorting. So it has ferret as the anaka, which is usually the gecko. But there is a good explanation, because I think the the Septuagint, I think, renders it as No, no, that's for
Septuagint has a
the
different order, I
think-
think.
yeah, that's
yeah,
for
I
the
think
chameleon.
the KJV did touch the Septuagint, but yeah, in the King James version we have weasel, mouse, tortoise, ferret, chameleon, lizard, snail, mole. Like
Again, yes, it is like
all over the place.
Yeah.
It is interesting that BDB dictionary renders anaka, which is usually translated to gecko here in this JPS, as ferret or shrew mouse. I have to check this because it's interesting, like how. No, because it's interesting to see that how the different
Oh.
definitions of this are. I need to check this.
Yeah.
They're wildly
Maybe I'll post it on Discord.
And to make a
sorry.
point here, like some Christians, they think KJV is the authoritative, and yet it's citing animals that are incorrect by translation.
We don't even necessarily know which is the correct translation.
Exactly. Well, and we don't know what some of these animals even are for sure. It's like these animals are forbidden. We don't know what they are.
You've got the Hebrew Bible. That's not a translation. What does the Hebrew Bible say in 29, 30, and 31?
Well, the thing is, we also have to remember that the big point of this is that these animals now, we don't know what they are. So whatever word that they used for them in the past, they would have understood it, however way. But now we just don't know exactly how.
Yeah, but
yes,
but it could be. You can compare, for example, in other languages like Akkadian and such. I need to check this. I only have
you can come up with cognates, but that only gets you so far because you don't want to necessarily fall into an etymological fallacy. So I think that would be the big issue here. But then once you get to the KJV, like the thing is, they were working off of very late manuscripts, and that is one of its biggest downfalls. Is that you could say that the translators did like the best they could do, sure, but the thing is, because of their bad manuscript evidence that they had at the time, that they had access to, you're going to see changes here and there. Now, whether or not there are some here, I don't know, but they certainly had access to low quality manuscripts.
I would guess that some of these animals in the KJV list are not native to the area.
Oh yeah, definitely, I would say.
So it's definitely a mistranslation.
Yeah, but and snail as well is a bit bizarre. But I need to check this. Maybe I'll do this on Discord. I'll list every.
Well, I mean,
we're French people.
If you're putting things together based on the most random character, things that have shells or carry their bodies around on their back, they're coat themselves in a hard coating or something, then you're talking about armadillos or snails. Who knows, right? It's just something weird and creepy, and you scream when it shows up. If you did
but I did expand a little bit about the chameleon because that is interesting. The Hebrew Bible reads Tin Shamet. The name is almost identical to that of the white owl in verse 18, which reads Tin Shemet. Levine notes that both are called so because of the sounds they make, possibly from the root nasham, which is snort, something about the sounds. KJV renders mole, possibly based on the Septuagint and Vulgate, which do render mole as well.
But it's possible that the Septuagint has a different order, and then the translations other translators were like, well, actually, look in this this manuscript.
Lawrence has the version. I forgot.
So I think that's another issue. Like the Septuagint versus the Masoretic might be different order, and then the translations based on the Masoretic would then contradict the ones based on the Septuagint, and then you get really confused. But,
so I don't know if they have a different order. So I do see chameleon in here. That one is listed. It's literally chameleon. So
but is it in the last part?
Let's see.
What's the last part? Because the Tin Shamet is in the last.
Oh, it's in the last part.
And
okay.
Last one in the list.
Okay. Wait, which one's the last? Or how many is chameleon to the last one?
Second last.
Should be the first.
No, the last. Yes.
Oh, the last one. Okay. Yeah. So the last one is
depending on the translation, but
in the
Septuagint.
Aspalax. No, I don't know which one that is. I'd have to look it up, but it says here. Chameleon, Calabotes, Kai Saura, Kai Aspalax. So they have chameleon and then 3 following it.
Okay, yeah. So Anaka is translated as chameleon, but it might not be they're actually translating.
The translation of the Septuagint that I use says that it's mole at the end.
Right. That's what.
So
It might
did
be.
we,
I'd have
are
to
so
look up
different.
the word.
Yeah,
did we
I also need to look this
specify?
up.
Did the God's unchanging, infallible, absolute truth word specify that whether we can eat spiders, and it doesn't depend on whether they have hands?
They
No.
would be considered. I think the idea is that they're creeping things of the land that are forbidden, but they're not part of this list of animals that if one fell in a pot of food, the food is now forbidden. Like
Yeah.
these were reserved for these, like, I guess, I don't know, taboo animals. I guess might be the
Right.
right
So
word.
are we able
Mice.
to? Are we allowed to eat monitor lizards?
No.
I don't think
And
so.
it's like on the end of the scale. It's like it's so bad that if its body touches something else, it becomes impure.
Okay, so even in the Hebrew Bible, does it specify that monitor lizards we cannot eat?
I
mean, it
don't know what
specifies all
I
kinds
mean,
of lizards.
again, I need to
It's
check.
definitely not kosher according to the Bible.
All right, what
Like,
about
definitely-
snakes?
You're
Also,
not supposed to eat
I
snakes.
I
but
don't
snakes
know.
are
I
not
need to
considered
check this.
shretzim according to this.
No.
Does the
Like,
Bible
anywhere.
say in any version that we can't eat snakes?
Not specifically.
Pretty much.
We
It's
were
just not-
saying
it's-
that is just the carcasses, but now it seems like if some of these animals touch something, it's unclean for the day, or you
The
have to throw it
carcass
out.
touches it. Yeah, the carcass
Yeah.
touches something.
No,
Wait, hold up.
Fall into the clay pot,
That's
and
a
then
dead
you have
body.
There is a good explanation. That in verse 32, when one of the
That's
Oh,
what
like
every
the one
rabbi
that-
says, right?
Oh boy.
well, that's not a rabbi actually. That's a scholar. Paran comments but because it is, these vermin are common and sometimes dwell inside houses, on the walls and on the ceiling. Therefore, their carcasses could fall on utensils and on food. Because of that, the danger of uncleanness from the vermin is greater than that of uncleanness from a carcass of a larger animal. The word mehem of them is directed to every one of the 8 unclean vermin. Chazal suggested in Talmud Chulin 74a that this word is also directed to any body part, which is detached from the body of these animals while still alive.
So if a living bug fell into the clay pot, it's okay.
If it dies.
If
Yeah,
it doesn't die,
Not a
If it
bug.
if you take it out.
Not a bug.
no, not a bug. The creeping
This
things that walk
specific
on land.
list of vermin.
Yes,
that
these
they're listing.
specific.
You-
Yes.
I think
If
vermin's
it's
a
still
good
I have a
one.
alive, it's
question about
okay.
this. What if the water,
Yes.
for example,
Yeah.
was unclean itself, like it was, just dishwater, or if it was sewage or something? Would that still be considered
Well, that's a
clean
different
if you
kind
leave
of
it for an
unclean.
hour?
Yes,
I know.
it is.
Just clarifying, just wanted to clarify that.
About verse 33, the clay pot. In Hebrew, it's kli cheresh. More accurate will be an earthen vessel, like the KJV and JPS render it. The command to break impure earthen vessels is based on chapter 6, verse 28, which in the Hebrew Bible is 6:21. And verse 35, an oven or cooking pot must be broken up. Hebrew for oven is tanur, and the Hebrew for word kiraim, which is translated here as cooking pot, more accurately should be rendered stove, as Levine suggests, or cooking furnace, as BDB dictionary renders it. Levine comments, the word tanur is defined as a large covered ceramic oven, whereas kiraim designates a grate or stove top in which fire is kindled, and upon which 2 pots could be placed for cooking. Often such appliances were installed in the floor of a room, set in a corner flush with the walls. It was probably thought that the intense heat generated in stoves and ovens made the ceramic material more susceptible to impurity than was the case with ceramic storage vessels. Verse 36, a spring or a cistern remains clean. The reason is that the spring and cistern are embedded in the ground, and according to Talmud Shabbat 81a, anything that is attached to the ground has the same legal status as the ground itself, which cannot become ritually impure.
Legal status.
Verse 40. Verse
There
41.
is a whole
sorry.
book of the Talmud. There's like a whole tractate of the Talmud that talks about like the different types of uncleanliness and how they pass around. I think there isn't even. I think it's more than one. I think there's one that's just about the types of impurity that are that come from the human body and how they, like, if you're in the same room as a dead body, you become impure. But if you're in like a room that doesn't have a roof, then you're fine. But like, yeah, so there's like a whole tractate that goes into all of that stuff.
Well, you're not
Suspended
supposed to touch
suspension.
like a tomb, right? That's why they
Right, and when you
whitewash the
bury people,
tombs.
you have to bury them, with a certain amount of space between the body and the
Doesn't
and
Jesus
the
use
top
like
of
an
the tomb.
analogy with that, Lawrence? If I remember right.
Sorry, is there what?
Doesn't Jesus talk about the whitewashed tombs?
Yeah, that's during the woes section in
Can't
Matthew,
remember.
and I believe also in Luke. Yeah, that's an analogy. That's not relevant to this. You are like whitewashed
Yeah.
tombs full of dead men's bones.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
The law is more like if you
Like
make a
you're-
tomb, you have to construct it in a certain
You're
way
clean
so
on
that
the
the
outside. but
Yeah,
you're dirty
they
on the
had
inside.
sepulchres in some cases and just burials in others, I guess.
Yeah, people didn't actually do like modern burial back then. A lot of times it was like, you might have like a family room that was like kind of underground, and then like shelves for each person. Yeah.
There's some great catacombs that still exist that actually house that in that part of the world too. I've actually always wanted to go and see them because I've seen some fascinating things about them. They had like an entire necropolis at one point, I think. Where do you know where I'm talking about, Lawrence or Isaac? There's a
Is
uh,
that entire Acropolis?
Paris?
Yeah.
Oh wait,
Necropolis. Yeah, there's one that has a huge area full for that time period.
I think Paris has a necropolis, no?
I know Paris does, but I'm referring specifically to the biblical accounts. I'm trying to
Oh.
remember where I heard about that. I read about it too.
There is
I
something
can't
like
remember what
the
it's called.
the rabbi tombs or something.
It's it's
in
pretty
somewhere in the
sprawling,
north.
and I did want to go someday and see that because it's archaeologically fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody
So,
in the comments accused us of being too scared to criticize the Quran.
oh,
Not
Have you
again.
ever heard
Yeah.
of Fidel Reads the Quran? It's on Arn's channel. It went for what 3 or 4 years, and it was absolutely fantastic. Go and review that.
You
please.
This
did
show
the
is
whole
the-
freaking thing.
It's like watching the sequel without watching the
Do your
prequel.
research. Yeah, do your
Like-
research, pal. Come
I
on.
feel like that's always like a big like it's supposed to be a gotcha or something, but really it's just a diversion as like don't criticize me, criticize these other people, please. But the
Yeah.
Crazy ones, they're
What
crazy.
I like about this is the comment was made by a Christian, and he said we're
Yeah.
too afraid to tackle the Quran, implying that the God of Islam is more powerful than the God of Christianity, which is to me is funny.
Well, no, it's
No,
more
I don't think
that
that's the case.
more Muslims, they believe more Muslims are willing to murder you for hurting
Right.
their fifis
Yeah,
than
I'm
Christians.
I'm
still
mentality.
Lilith.
There
I'm still
was a
I'm
time
still
when I
going
would
with my
say that's true,
explanation.
but
I'm still going with
I
my
mean,
explanation.
Go ahead. But
Just
it's a gotcha that they both use. I think it's hilarious. If you criticize Islam, they'll be like, "You don't say that about Christians." I'm like, "Yeah, no, fuck them too. Stop it. It's they're shitty. You're shitty. You're all shitty. It's all shit."
Okay, I'll
Right.
continue my commentary. Verse 41. Paran comments, verses 41 to 42 are a sort of appendix that deal with earth swarmers. The prohibition of eating these swarmers is not mentioned in verses 29 to 38, but only touching their carcasses. Scripture, therefore, repeats and mentions the prohibition of eating them. However, the language used here is general and encompasses all earth swarmers, including snakes, millipedes, scorpions, beetles, and the like of them, not just the 8 species that were mentioned previously.
So we're not allowed to eat snakes, and I forget how we know that.
It says crawls on its belly.
Yep, on his
in
belly.
Dude.
42.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah, actually,
first-
about 42. Peter, can you please show the picture?
Ooh, pictures.
Gajon.
Yes. So
Aren't
in the
you eat
Masoretic
snake?
text, the word for belly, gajon, has an enlarged vav, which is the third letter here, which indicates that this is the middle letter of the Pentateuch.
Ah.
Yes.
So we're halfway through.
Yes.
So-
When it comes to the letters, there's also another one. I don't know if
Right,
it's in
letter
13 or
counts.
14, which is the verses, the middle of the verses.
Oh, interesting.
Now I've got that song stuck in my head. Whoa.
I can
what
understand why a
happened?
scribe
Hello?
writing this thing would want to have a symbol that be like, now I've done it halfway.
Yeah, the Masoretic text has very interesting like symbols, which especially there is one in Numbers which is an inverted nun, and we'll get to that. It's very interesting.
What was the song, Lalandra?
Whoa, we're halfway there. Whoa, living on a prayer.
Take my hand.
Yeah, you can take
Okay.
it.
Make it, I swear.
All right, stop it. Stop it,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of you. Celion D says, "For the only God seems the guy really needs to repeat that he is the Lord." Yep. He's that narcissistic.
Peter, can you
And-
please
He's
get a
very
picture?
secure. You can tell in his godhood. Very,
Thank you.
very secure. That's what I always think about the man who pounds his chest about what an alpha man he is. Very secure.
Yeah, he's very much into that line about, "Don't you know who I am?" Tony Carrar says, to answer the earlier question about kosher BJs, it depends on if you end up chewing cud.
That's awful.
Oh,
That's awful.
I think.
I don't even want to
Don't
comment
chew.
on that.
Don't chew on it. You have to get your teeth out of the way.
No, teeth. That's
would-
no.
I would guess from the Old Testament
Nope,
that
I'm not
this
gonna
is
say the
considered
joke.
sodomy, right?
Mm,
Is
I would-
sodomy?
I think it's probably impure. There is this idea that like any sex between a married couple is holy, but with the more like modern idea that spilling seed is bad, maybe it's not a good idea. But then again, I think you're allowed to spill seed in the context of marital relations. So
I hate the term spilling seed. I've always hated that.
Okay, come on the ground.
Thank you. Appreciate it,
you
Lawrence.
don't. What about
Clarify that.
sowing your oats?
Non-procreative sexual activity.
Yeah, I think Judaism
Okay.
sees that as fine.
Whatever.
within the
Just don't
context
get
of
it in their
marriage.
eyes. That's not nice.
It stings.
Are we gonna start talking about bukkake again?
No. Please read the comments. No. We're past that.
No,
It's
I-
more interesting than
Oh.
eating bugs.
Okay. Fabulous Lazovskis says, so if you find a dead animal in your barn in the morning, wait all day and get it out and bury it before evening to be unclean for less time. Biblical loopholes are the best.
Well, the thing is, you could say, well, it would have to be, you would become unclean the next evening. So that might be an interpretation there. Like how, like,
I guess
you know,
he's saying
on
don't
your
touch it.
next turn, you know, in my case, it would be like Magic the Gathering or something. So like you could do something on your, if someone plays a card that says something on, you know, their on your
my
opponent's next turn or something, it just means the next turn.
You're talking about the biblical stacking order.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cast counterspell against your counterspell against your counterspell.
Damn
Yeah, but the
straight.
thing
You,
is,
you,
I
you
grew up
need,
in the
you
90s
need to
too.
consider the stack, okay? It's very important.
If you find the dead animal in the morning and you have to wait till the evening to get rid of it, and then you anyway have to wait till the evening to be unclean again, like I guess you could say, if you find a dead animal in your house, don't touch it if you need to do something in a state of ritual purity, and then when you're finished with that, you can then get rid of it and then become impure.
But what
That's
do
kind of
you
a
need to
loophole, I
do
guess.
in a state of ritual purity? I mean, I assume you go to the temple or the tabernacle in a state of ritual purity. Does the same
If
go
you
for
are
the
a
synagogue?
priest, I think if you are a priest, you can't eat from the
From the
from
temple
the,
food.
from the
Right.
food. So even though you don't go to the temple, if they bring back food, you can't partake in it if you're in a state of ritual impurity.
That could be inconvenient.
Arn, I have to
Which is why
to
this is always
bring
the-
this
I
up.
just know- I
You
just
did
noticed
know?
I'm the only one on screen.
No, you're not.
Nope.
No, you
What?
were. Now you're not.
What happened?
How did that happen?
I have no clue. Oh, probably because your computer rebooted. That's a possibility.
Okay.
One more thing,
But
Arn.
it hasn't been doing that since then.
The stream
I-
shows that.
I don't know.
earlier.
But I need to bring this up, Arn. You did know that the term bukkake comes from food?
No,
Who?
please don't repeat
does.
this word ever again on
It-
the stream.
it-
Thank you very much.
Just check
From
it.
food?
It's a food term that was later used for
Peter.
different things. But it is a food term.
Trust me, just
Okay.
Google it.
Moving on, Eric Wander says, "Why would God save unclean animals on the ark if they're so bad for his people? Was Moses allowed to touch those animals? You worried about unclean animals on the ark? He put a cursed tree right in the middle of the garden." Okay. Anyway,
God is a psychopath who got really, really high. This is the answer to all your questions.
That's what all that
Mo-
smoke comes from.
yeah, Mojo says, I feel like the Bible is a great historical artifact. I wish the Berbers had something like it, like Egyptians and maybe the Norse have too, right?
Historical artifact,
feel-
yes, great.
Colonialism.
Well, as it's great as a historical
using
artifact is the thing.
colonialism.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I guess so. That's true.
like a great villain, right? So
Yeah.
they might have one like it. You might have to dig a little deeper for something like that. I'm not sure. I know that, for example, the Ethiopians have the Ethiopian church has their own separate story concerning, like, it's called the Fet and the Gast. So they have their own separate story aside from the biblical stuff. So you might have to dig kind of deep for Berber stuff, but I feel like there should be.
I think what it's hinting at here is that the native peoples of the Middle East and North Africa have had a lot of their history and archaeology like destroyed by
that is true.
The Muslim conquest.
That is true.
And by Christian archaeologists looking
Aramaic
to wedge
speaking
things
Syria
into their
and
own
using that
narrative.
stuff.
Well, I mean, there's even talk that the Ark and the Covenant is even in Ethiopia.
Yeah, they like to say that.
Yeah, I know.
That was in the documentary I mentioned last time, where they talked about how they believed that it was possible that they had sort of several arcs, and the one you took into battle had some sort of basically flamethrower technology. I mean,
although it's more than likely it's been destroyed by now. In fact, even at the end, I mentioned this before, but at the end of Second Kings, the Babylonians come in and destroy all the gold in the temple. Ark was made of gold. It was in the temple. It'd probably be destroyed. There's a reason we don't hear about it after that. So
they burned everything.
To me, it seems pretty clear it was destroyed.
We need Tomer to figure this out, because according to Ron Wyatt, it's now in the possession of the Israeli government.
Oh.
No. Indiana
Thinking about
Jones
bad
put
words.
it in the giant casing in the, and then it ended up in Donald Trump's bathroom.
It's in a bathroom in Mar-a-Lago.
Exactly.
So
That's
medicine
Eric
cabinet.
holy dumps.
He needed
Eric
a really
Wonder
big
says,
medicine cabinet.
Oh, sorry.
Eric Wander says, so what punishments would people get if they could break their ovens or cooking pots? If they don't break their ovens or cooking pots, what if they get a rat and throw it outside?
Maybe my money is in something, or like the Book of Education. I need to check on this.
Presumably they get sick.
I think if you become impure and then do something that is forbidden to be done while in a state of impurity, like eating the food or going into the temple precinct, then there is a punishment. But I don't remember if it calls for the death penalty or not.
But see, that's interesting though, because it doesn't specify direct punishment for this. At least not yet that I've seen. So I mean, that's an interesting
It's
question.
the priests. The priests, if the priests become unholy, they're not fit for all of these other things.
Yeah, so the punishment is exactly. Like, you cannot do those other things until you are clean again. So they give you like this. In this case, it would be more of a ritualistic waiting period than anything else. But then other parts are going to get actual like washing and stuff like that. So.
Well, technically, given our last session, it would seem that if as a priest you violate these taboos too many times, God will just and then tell your family they're not allowed to mourn for you.
That is his default, is to murder you because God is loving and forgiving.
And tell your parents that they're not allowed to grieve or show any signs that they're in any way upset.
I have to tap out. I have to go. I got guests.
All right.
Have a nice Mexico trip. See ya.
Peace out. Peace out.
Thank you much.
I have only two comments. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I think I could sum up chapter 11 as God saying, I made all these things, but don't touch some of them. They're icky. Yuck. So why? Yeah.
I have only
two. Vulture.
I have only two comments left. First of all, on verse 33, or be made unclean by them. In Hebrew, venitemetam bam. Ibn Ezra derived nitemetem from the root tet mem he, which appears in Job 18:3. Why are we thought of as brutes, regarded by you as stupid, nitemenu? and so he rendered it, or be made stupid by them, which reflects the idea that eating forbidden meat leads to mental impairity. Milgrom and Paran, however, reject this interpretation.
I mean, if it has a prion in it, then possibly.
Yeah. Mad cow
Yep.
disease.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And finally, verse 44, consecrate yourselves and be holy. Milgrom comments, this statement is parallel in structure and opposite in meaning to verse 43. Israel must not contaminate itself by ingesting land swarmers because holiness, the goal it must seek, cannot coexist with impurity. That Israel is commanded to be holy is the main thrust of H. Israel can become holy, which it is not at present, the position of D, by obedience to God's moral and ritual commandments. This objective is anticipated in earlier sources like Exodus 19:6 and 22:30, but is assiduously avoided and by implication denied by P, which holds that only the priests and temporary Nazarites are holy. And that's it.
Yay!
Yay!
Thank you,
That
Nicely
chapter 11. I gotta say on a cultural note though, a lot of these things, and I, from someone coming from a Vietnamese background, like the person was talking about catfish in Vietnamese, but my southern part of my family eat catfish too. Like what, you know, it's like if it doesn't cause a disease or anything, and if it causes it nourishes you, you know, eat it unless you know it tastes bad or it's inevitable, right? So like why, you know? And everybody always looks at me and Asian people weird at some of the things we eat, but like y'all should be able to identify because like like the British, they eat blood pudding and not
What
blood
about
pudding.
haggis?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, you want to talk about foods that
haven't
we
had-
white folk eat. There you go.
Yeah, I haven't had
haggis
haggis
was a
that
punishment.
was super authentic before.
Yeah.
But
I
from what
think
I
we all have food taboos, and this is an example of it being written down and being quite explicit and quite quite a lot of stuff. I mean, like even Western people will have their own food taboos. Like they wouldn't eat dog or horse, but these are just cultural. I don't know what the word is. I wouldn't say cultural baggage, but it's
mores.
Yeah.
It's and like I don't eat
Cultural
bugs. I think
quirks.
that's
That's
totally
bugs.
gross. But like everybody do whatever you want to do. I'm just not eating bugs. And so it's
do you eat shrimp and lobster? Those are bugs.
I avoid those generally.
Oh.
Oh, I
But
love shrimp. Oh.
the yeah, it again with stuff like this, I think it's interesting that in like the Christian interpretation, they'll have sort of different tiers. The laws you're literally supposed to obey, like not stealing or killing anybody. Well, anybody. Well, that's a big old can of worms. And then you've got sort of legalese that has practical elements for the running of a state. But then you have ritual purity laws. And the concept, it like maybe this was just not intended originally, but I find that the concept of purity, when attached to any living thing, breeds a multitude of horrors. I mean, think about the way we bred dogs. We bred dogs for specific traits, for speed, for strength, for herding ability. And there were certain physical features that would sort of manifest with those that were most fit for that. It sort of came hand in hand. But then when you stop focusing on the actual goal and you start focusing on purebreds, then you just get inbreeding and monstrosities and horrible genetic diseases. Purity is always the wrong goal for anything alive. It's great for metals.
I will
Fly
refer
purity
you
to
also.
silver.
I will also refer you to the very, very easily identifiable version of this sort of thing called the Habsburg dynasty. So if you want to talk about the problems with purity culture, there you are in the chin.
Yep.
And it yeah, I mean they actually ended, I believe, with oh gosh, I can't remember his name. He was the Spanish. He was the last one. He was so deformed that actually when I first saw him, I thought he was this weird hybrid creature. But they struggled to make a good painting of him because he was so deformed, and he also had a black lacked testicle apparently, so he couldn't even breed. So that is a prime example of all those types of things diverging, even all the way to Queen Victoria, who herself was part of that entire line. And so we can see all those things in the royals, arguably, maybe even to this day, to a certain extent, that they have issues of that sort of thing. And that has caused a lot of mental instabilities, deformations. King Wilhelm II, for example, had a retracted arm on one side, which he always hid. It's also considered one of those deformities as well. There's a lot of factors that also go into the mental state, which is probably why we had so many wars. Just want a little fun, personal.
Great.
So that's all part of it. So inbreeding and purity and stuff like that is,
as well as racist ideologies, as well
That's
as
right.
all kinds of things like that. If you
That's
ever
right.
hear, and the rape culture that is purity culture for sexual purity. So if you ever hear anyone referring to purity in relation to anything that you cannot melt in a furnace, or anything like that, just be wary.
Yeah,
Just
this chapter
red flag.
kind of reminds me of the racism people think about other groups about what they eat. Because this whole chapter is about how we eat these things and that makes us clean. Unlike Gentiles, that we're
Sanctified,
holy,
like separated.
sanctified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should mention that there was at least I think in the Germany or around Europe, a thing called Judensau, which is a depiction of Jews suckling from a swine.
Yep.
Oh,
And
Okay.
it
That's
was
exactly what
featured
it translates to.
and it was featured like in cathedral statues or something like this. So
It's a
there are
very
still
old,
some Judensau.
goggles.
Yeah,
or-
in Renaissance, I think.
I think
So
that
the
must have,
association,
the
the association of Jews with pigs was always an anti-Semitic trope.
Mhm.
Well, and we can see, as you mentioned, that pigs they were only one of many unclean animals just for the sake of eating, not like they weren't allowed to exist. And then it became more and more of a thing. And I mean, even Hitchens pointed out that the charcuterie and the habit in Spain and Portugal of, handing out these lovely little meats was always to weed out secret Jews or Muslims who
Wow.
might have aversion,
Moranos.
and
It's like the
eating
practice
towards
of
agenda.
it's like the practice of modern Christians going to supermarkets and buying just a packet of pork and trying to go specifically to the Muslim checkout person to get them in trouble because they don't want to handle it.
It's
they do that? Oh my god!
I've heard about some like TikTokers or YouTubers doing stuff and filming it.
Why would you just
So
be
we
such
gotta
a pity person?
They don't say they did it on purpose, but you.
yeah.
Got a couple more comments to read before we close up. DQ says some scholars say that at the stage of development found in Leviticus was ritual cleanliness and had not transitioned into morality, widely accepted. And then DQ continues, but Leviticus was no longer a tribal religion of goat herders. It was a city-state religion that had so many cleanliness rules that anyone could see it wasn't ensuring against illness. But rather, it was about national identity and status. It became about social order and justifying oligarchy.
Yeah, I mean, these things evolve. Obviously, some of these traditions may have started with reasonable cleanliness, like the pigs and the toilets, and the getting the ick from that is not the most unreasonable thing. But yeah, and then it develops into nationalism, tribalism, racism, honestly, by the time of the priestly source. It was just a lot of this shit ties into flat out racism at the time against various tribes in the area that they want to identify as othering. And it's all, we can't even be certain of how many of those things there are because, there's imperfect records of the time, but you can see it all through, and often you can identify specifics, and sometimes you just, it's lost to time, but it's still fucked up.
And then Trevor Wright says, what exactly is your take on all of these ritual laws? Because I think it fails to deliver any benefit whatsoever when referring to what makes them clean and unclean. It doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be
as
neat. It would be neat if the Bible gave some explanation about microbes.
Mm-hmm.
I view it as
why you should wash your hands and such. Go ahead.
Use
I
some
view it
soap
as-
with some cloth, you know.
I view it as a more of a cultural remnant of the Israelites and Jews in general.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Very
All right,
impractical.
so yeah, so we're
It
a
is,
little bit
but
over,
it's again, it was their culture. So
yeah, we're a
whether or
little bit
not
over
it was
time.
practical or not.
Well,
sorry,
I
I
don't
didn't
know.
mean to cut
It's
you
their
off.
culture, sure, but then like on the other level, it's impractical.
Yeah, I yes, that's the yeah, I understand, but again, there are the reasons for it. It's not just because for them they had reasons.
Impractical.
Might be the
Mojo
reasons
adds
I'm
that-
just kidding. Go ahead.
Mojo
No,
adds that in Islam you are born pure and God forgives your sins directly. In Christianity you were born in sin and need to accept a savior. What is the case in Judaism?
Similar. I don't know if God has to forgive your sins directly. In Judaism, it's you're not born into sin, but when you commit a sin, you have to do some sort of restitution. But it's kind of seen as going back to God, returning. But you can't.
There is.
Yeah.
I remember a quote by Chastai Kilaskas who said that the Jews live by their religion and the Christians die by their religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only difference maybe is that Judaism have a thing that if you wrong a person, you have to do restitution to that person first before you can come before God and say.
That's admirable.
That is admirable.
It might be a later idea.
There are some remnants of it in Christian teaching. Me too, Lawrence. If you come to the altar and there remember that your friend has something against you, go make peace with your brother and then come to the altar and give your gift. So it's, but unfortunately, that didn't really seem to stick it out in the practical applications of Christianity, which is too bad. That would have been better.
We're a little bit over time and we're losing people having to duck out. So I'm going to have to do the same. So I would just want to remind everybody, we've been trying to do a Wednesday show, just trying to catch up or get a little bit quicker pace on going through the Bible. But this Wednesday happens to be my and my wife's 14th wedding anniversary. Yes, and we will be in Cancun. So we're there for a week, and I'm thinking that I will still try. I'm going to see if I can broadcast from Mexico to still do next week when we do Leviticus 12 on Saturday. I can't do Wednesday. That is our anniversary day, but
Don't
I'd like
answer, Aaron.
What? What?
But don't answer because you know already. Don't answer this question. Does anybody know what Cancun means?
I don't.
Snake pit. It means snake pit.
Oh, that's why you went. That's awesome.
Okay, this is becoming more and more making sense now.
Okay, yeah. Well, okay. Happy anniversary to both of you. We love you. Have a good time. Don't worry about us on Wednesday. And hopefully, if Peter and the internet in Cancun work out, we will see you on Saturday.
Yes.
Have a great.
I'll be here on Sunday for Book of Mormon.
And you have two more comments before we close up.
And two more comments. Majestic P. Beck offers $20 Canadian, says thanks. And then that guy said, love you, Oren. Thank you so much. All right. And we are out. See you next week. Leviticus 12.
Bye.